A city in freefall. The West River Bridge stretches across Metropolis like a steel artery, its cables singing in the wind that carries the scent of rain and exhaust through the urban canyon below. Tonight, those cables will bear witness to something extraordinary, though the thousands of commuters trapped in their evening exodus cannot yet comprehend the magnitude of what approaches. The first tremor begins as a distant rumble, felt more than heard, vibrating through the bridge's suspension towers with the persistence of an earthquake that refuses to announce itself properly. Traffic slows, then stops entirely as drivers crane their necks skyward, searching for answers in a sky that offers only the familiar glow of neon and streetlight against low-hanging clouds. Then the explosion tears through the night like God's own flashbulb. The LexCorp Chemical Transport, a behemoth of steel and toxic cargo, jackknifes across 4 lanes as its driver fights desperately against whatever catastrophic failure has seized his vehicle's systems. Sparks fountain from beneath the trailer as metal shrieks against asphalt, and the acrid smell of burning rubber mingles with something far more sinister, the sweet, cloying scent of chemicals that were never meant to kiss open air. Panic spreads faster than the green vapor, now billowing from the transport's ruptured tanks. Car doors slam as people abandon their vehicles, fleeing toward either end of the bridge in a stampede of terror that threatens to claim more lives than the disaster itself. Children cry for parents lost in the chaos. Adults shout instructions that no one can hear over the growing roar of escaping gases and the ominous groaning of steel under stress. The bridge itself begins to sing not the gentle wind song of its cables, but the deeper, more ominous harmony of a structure pushed beyond its limits. The chemical reaction eating through the support pylons works with methodical efficiency, transforming decades of engineering excellence into a countdown clock that no one can see but everyone can feel in their bones. And then, cutting through the screams and the chemical hiss and the grinding protest of tortured metal, comes something impossible. A shadow moves against the smoke-choked skyknot, the angular silhouette of helicopter or aircraft, but something that defies easy categorization. Something that moves with purpose through the chaos, descending toward the bridge with a speed that should be fatal, and a grace that suggests complete mastery over forces that ground mere mortals. The first civilian to spot him, young woman clutching her infant daughter as she flees toward the Metropolis side, will later tell reporters that she thought she was hallucinating. The shock, she'll explain, must have affected her vision, because what she saw couldn't possibly exist. A figure in flowing crimson, moving through the toxic cloud as if it were nothing more than morning mist, his cape billowing behind him like a banner of hope in a world gone mad. He doesn't speak as he works. There's no time for speeches or reassurances, only action compressed into impossible moments. He appears beside the chemical transport just as its final support gives way, catching 20 tons of steel and poison with hands that shouldn't be able to bear such weight. The screech of metal bending fills the air as he redirects the vehicle's momentum, guiding it away from the fleeing civilians and toward the river below. The bridge shudders again, more violently now, as the chemical reaction reaches critical mass. Support cables snap with sounds like gunshots, and the roadway itself begins to buckle and fold. But the figure in red is already moving, a blur of purposeful motion that seems to exist in multiple places simultaneously. He catches a falling section of concrete the size of a city bus, tosses it safely into the river, then appears 50 yards away to steady a family of 4 who are about to be crushed by a rolling vehicle. A businessman in an expensive suit, paralyzed by fear as toxic vapor swirls around him, suddenly finds himself lifted and deposited safely on solid ground. His rescuer already gone, before he can offer thanks or even process what has happened. The woman with the infant daughter watches it all unfold from what she hopes is a safe distance, her child pressed close to her chest. Later, she'll struggle to explain to her husband what she witnessed, how one man, if that's what he was, seemed to hold an entire catastrophe at bay, through sheer force of will and impossible capability. How he moved not just with speed, but with a precision that suggested he knew exactly where everyone was, exactly what needed to be done, exactly how to transform disaster into deliverance. When the last civilian is clear, and the bridge finally surrenders to the inevitable, collapsing into the dark waters of the West River in a symphony of destruction and defeat, the figure in red hovers above the wreckage for just a moment. The woman catches a glimpse of his face in the reflected glow of emergency light strong. Features marked by determination and something else. Something that looks almost like sorrow for what could not be saved. Then he's gone, vanishing into the smoke and shadows as suddenly as he appeared, leaving behind only questions and the strange certainty that something fundamental has changed in the world. The age of Superman has begun, though none of them yet know his name. In the days that follow, as Metropolis rebuilds and the city's newspapers struggle to explain what their readers witnessed, that first glimpse will become the foundation of legend. The woman with the infant daughter will frame the blurry photograph. Her phone managed to capture a streak of red against smoke-filled sky and hang it in her kitchen where she can see it every morning. It reminds her. She'll tell her daughter years later that miracles are real. But this story doesn't begin with a miracle. It begins with tragedy, with the death of worlds and the birth of hope in equal measure. It begins in the far reaches of space, beneath the light of a red sun that has shone down upon wonders for 10,000 years, and will soon shine upon nothing at all. To understand the man who saved Metropolis that night, we must first understand what he lost. Krypton's last dawn. In the dying light of Ra, the red sun that has nurtured Krypton for millennia beyond counting, the crystalline spires of Kandor catch and refract the day's final glory into something that might have been mistaken for hope. Were hope not already such a rare commodity in these twilight years of civilization? The city capital rises from the planet's surface like a forest of living diamonds, each tower grown rather than built, shaped by sciences so advanced that they blur the line between technology and art, between achievement and hubris. Beneath those towers, in the hallowed halls of the Science Council, Jor-El of the House of El stands before his peers with the weight of absolute truth heavy on his shoulders. The evidence crystallized in his hands data matrices that pulse with the inexorable mathematics of planetary destruction tells a story that no Kryptonian wants to hear. Their world, this perfect jewel of scientific achievement and cultural refinement, is dying. The planet's core is unstable, he declares, his voice carrying the measured authority of one who has devoted his life to understanding the fundamental forces that govern existence. The seismic data is unambiguous. Krypton has perhaps 1 year, possibly less, before complete structural collapse. The council chamber, a vast dome of translucent material that offers a panoramic view of Kandor's gleaming majesty, fills with the kind of silence that follows heresy. These are Krypton's greatest min-scientists whose theories have unlocked the secrets of space and time, whose innovations have eliminated disease and want, whose wisdom has guided their people through 10,000 years of peaceful prosperity. They are not accustomed to problems that cannot be solved, futures that cannot be redirected through the proper application of knowledge and will. Rozar, the council's first speaker, regards Jor-El with the patient expression of an adult humoring a brilliant but misguided child. Your concerns are noted, Jor-El, but our planetary engineers have monitored Krypton's geological stability for centuries. The core has shown fluctuations before. It is within normal parameters. These are not normal fluctuations. Jor-El insists, activating a holographic display that fills the chamber's center with a three-dimensional representation of their world's interior. The image reveals a heart of molten fury, pressure waves building toward critical mass with mathematical precision. The resonance cascade began 3 years ago. Each seismic event amplifies the next. The progression is exponential, irreversible. But the Council sees only what it wishes to see. Krypton has endured for so long, achieved so much, that the notion of ending seems not just impossible but personally insulting. They are the children of Ra, the inheritors of wisdom, accumulated across eons. Surely their science, their technology, their sheer accumulated excellence can overcome something as mundane as planetary geology. Outside the council chamber, in the residential districts where crystal gardens bloom with bioluminescent flora and families gather for evening meals beneath the gentle glow of artificial aurora, life continues its ancient rhythms. Children play games that would challenge the greatest minds of lesser worlds. Artists craft sculptures from living light. Scholars debate philosophical questions that other civilizations have never thought to ask. None of them know that their world is counting down its final days. In the private laboratory that occupies the highest tower of his family's ancestral holdings, Jor-El works with desperate intensity on equations that his peers have dismissed as impossibility. His wife, Lara Lorvan, moves through the space with the quiet grace that first drew him to her decades ago, her presence a steady anchor in the storm of his calculations. She understands the mathematics as well as he does, perhaps better, but her focus has shifted to more practical concerns. The Council will never authorize a planetary evacuation, she says, her fingers dancing across control surfaces that respond to her touch with the fluid precision of instruments that know their operator intimately. They cannot accept that their world might end. Jor-El pauses in his work, studying the preliminary designs for what might be his people's salvation if he can convince them to accept it. The evacuation arc, designed to carry thousands of Kryptonians to distant worlds where they might rebuild their civilization, represents the accumulated knowledge of a lifetime devoted to space-time physics. But its construction would require resources and cooperation on a scale that Krypton's government seems incapable of providing. "Then we prepare what we can," he replies, his hand moving instinctively to rest over the small but growing curve of Lara's abdomen. Their child, conceived in hope and carried now through growing certainty of catastrophe, represents both everything they have to lose and everything they might yet save. Outside their tower, the first tremors of the coming cataclysm ripple through Krypton's bedrock. Seismometers in geological stations across the planet register the movement, but the data disappears into bureaucratic channels where it will be analyzed, discussed, and ultimately dismissed. The Science Council has made its decision. Jor-El's warnings are the product of an overly active imagination, the fears of a brilliant mind pushed to exhaustion by impossible problems. But in the deep places beneath Krypton's crystal cities, pressure builds toward release. The planet's core, already unstable from eons of heavy element mining and gravitational manipulation, inches toward the critical threshold that Jor-El's calculations have identified with terrifying precision. Each day brings new stress fractures. Each night sees the temperature differential between core and surface widen beyond safe parameters. And high above the planet's surface, in the cold vacuum of space, sensors that belong to no Kryptonian agency detect the subtle changes in gravitational field and electromagnetic radiation that herald planetary death. The entity that will later be known as Brainiac adjusts its course with mechanical precision, drawn by the same seismic instabilities that Jor-El has identified. But where the Kryptonian scientist sees catastrophe to be prevented, the artificial intelligence sees opportunity to be exploited. The great collector of worlds has been watching Krypton for decades, waiting for the perfect moment to add its crown jewel, the city of KANDOR, to his collection. The planet's impending destruction provides ideal cover for what might otherwise be noticed as an act of cosmic-scale theft. Let Krypton die as it will. Its greatest city will live forever, preserved in miniature as a testament to Brainiac's curatorial perfection. As Rao sets behind Krypton's crystal horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson that seem almost prophetic, the last great civilization prepares unknowingly for its final dawn. In his laboratory, Jor-El continues his work on salvation that his people will not accept. In her chambers, Lara prepares for the birth of a child who may inherit nothing but the memory of greatness. And in the depths of space, forces beyond their knowledge or control move toward convergence. The age of Krypton is ending. The age of Superman has yet to begin. The lifeboat and the loss. The birth of Kal-El occurs beneath a sky fractured by crimson lightning, as if Rao himself has chosen to mark this moment with celestial fire. Lara's labor pains coincide with the planet's own agony-siege contraction, mirrored by seismic tremors that rattle the crystal walls of their ancestral tower. Through the transparent dome above their private chambers, they can see other cities across Krypton's horizon flickering as power grids struggle to compensate for the mounting geological chaos. Jor-El cradles his newborn son in hands that have shaped the fundamental forces of the universe, yet tremble now with the weight of holding something infinitely more precious than any scientific achievement. The infant's eyes, when they open, reflect the deep blue of Krypton's ancient ocean seas that boiled away eons ago when their ancestors first learned to split atoms and reshape matter itself. In those eyes, Jor-El sees not just his child, but the future of his entire civilization compressed into one perfect, helpless form. He's beautiful, Lara whispers, her voice carrying the exhaustion of labor and the quiet strength that has sustained her through months of watching their world die around them. She reaches for the child, and Jor-El places their son against her chest, where the infant immediately settles into the rhythm of her heartbeat, a sound that will soon be the only Kryptonian music left in the universe. Outside their tower, Kandor burns. The attack comes without warning, though Jor-El's instruments have been tracking the massive object's approach for the past several hours. He assumed it was debris, perhaps, a fragment of one of Krypton's outer moons, broken free by the increasing gravitational instabilities. He could not have imagined that something with such clearly artificial characteristics would choose this moment, of all moments, to approach their dying world. The beam that lances down from space carries an energy signature unlike anything in Kryptonian science, a focused disruption field that doesn't destroy matter so much as reorganize it, according to principles that defy analysis. Where it touches Kandor's crystal spires, the great city begins to shrink with geometric precision, buildings and citizens and culture itself compressing into a space that grows smaller with each passing second. Jor-El's hands fly across his laboratory's control surfaces, desperate to understand what he's witnessing. The readings make no sense. Mass is being conserved, but volume is decreasing exponentially. It's as if reality itself is being edited, rewritten according to rules that exist outside normal space-time parameters. Within minutes, the crown jewel of Kryptonian civilization has been reduced to something that could fit in the palm of his hand, then vanishes entirely into the belly of the ship that hovers above like a mechanical god of endings. Brainiac, Jor-El breathes, the name coming to him from ancient legends and warnings that the Science Council dismissed as folklore. But there's no time to process the implications of mythological artificial intelligences made manifest. The theft of Kandor has accelerated Krypton's timetable of destruction. Without the city's massive gravitational anchor, the delicate balance that has kept their world stable for the past several months tips decisively toward catastrophe. The planet screams. It's not a sound that can be heard with earsets, a vibration that resonates through the crystal matrix of every structure, every instrument, every living thing on Krypton's surface. The harmonic frequency that once sang of their world's perfect stability has become a death knell, climbing toward pitches that threaten to shatter matter itself. Lara looks up from their son, her eyes wide with the understanding that comes from a lifetime of scientific training. How long? Jor-El's calculations, running continuously in his mind even as he watches their civilization collapse in real time, provide an answer that steals the breath from his lungs. Hours. Perhaps less. They have prepared for this moment across months of stolen time and secret labor. The starship that rests in the chamber beneath their tower represents the absolute pinnacle of Kryptonian engineering, compressed into a form small enough to escape their world's increasing gravitational chaos. It can carry perhaps a dozen individuals to safety among the stars, a handful of survivors, to carry their people's memory into whatever future awaits beyond Rao's light. But the Science Council has forbidden its use. Even now, as their world tears itself apart around them, the government maintains that evacuation is unnecessary, that Krypton's science will find a solution before the final moment arrives. They have issued orders that anyone attempting to leave the planet will be stopped by force. They prefer death to the admission that their confidence might have been misplaced. We could take him to the council, Lara suggests, though her voice carries no conviction. Show them what we're facing. Make them understand. Jor-El shakes his head, his attention divided between his family and the holographic displays that show him Krypton's death in exquisite, mathematical detail. They've had months to understand. They've chosen certainty over survival. We cannot save them from themselves. The starship was designed to carry them all, Jor-El, Lara, and the child who represents their hopes for the future. But as the planet's destruction accelerates beyond even his most pessimistic projections, harsh reality intrudes upon their careful plans. The gravitational distortions caused by Kandor's theft have altered the fundamental equations that govern escape velocity. What was once possible for a ship carrying 3 passengers becomes impossible for anything larger than the smallest possible payload. The choice that faces them is not between salvation and destruction. It is between the survival of their son and the survival of their family. The crystal matrix, Lara says suddenly, her voice carrying the excitement of inspiration. We can encode everything. Our entire cultural database, our history, our values, all of it, can be compressed into a storage medium small enough to accompany him. Jor-El nods, already moving toward the crystalline storage systems that house their civilization's accumulated knowledge. If they cannot save their people, they can at least ensure that their memory, their achievements, their dreams and failures and hard-won wisdom survive in some form. Kal-El will carry more than just Kryptonian genetics into the universe. He will carry the soul of an entire world. The work proceeds with desperate efficiency. Crystalline matrices that normally require days to properly encode receive terabytes of information in compressed bursts that threaten to overwhelm their storage capacity. Art and science, philosophy and poetry. The complete record of 10,000 years of civilization flows into devices no larger than a human child's fist. Music that will never again be heard on Krypton joins mathematical theorems that could revolutionize any world lucky enough to rediscover them. And woven through it all, encoded in quantum structures that will survive even the complete destruction of the storage medium itself, are the values that Jor-El and Lara have chosen to define their family's legacy. Compassion over conquest, service over self-interest, the protection of the innocent as the highest calling of those blessed with power. The final crystal contains something more personal: holographic recordings of both parents, speaking to a son they will never see grow to adulthood. Words of love and guidance, hopes and dreams, and the quiet wisdom that comes from facing the end of everything with dignity and tact. Messages that will guide and comfort a child who must learn to be both the last of his kind and the first of something new. As Rao rises for the final time over Krypton's crystal landscape, painting the sky in shades of red that now seem less prophetic than inevitable, Jor-El and Lara complete their preparations for a goodbye that encompasses not just their family, but their entire species. The starship, no larger than an atmospheric shuttle, gleams with the peculiar radiance that marks Kryptonian technology at its finest. Its navigation systems have been programmed with coordinates that will carry it to a yellow star 37 light-years distant, a world called Earth, where the biochemistry should be compatible enough to sustain Kryptonian life. More importantly, it's a world whose sun will grant their sun abilities that no Kryptonian has ever possessed. Under Earth's yellow star, Kal-El will become something unprecedented, not just a survivor of Krypton's destruction, but an instrument of hope powerful enough to protect his new home from the kinds of threats that claimed his birth world. They place their son in the ship's biochamber, surrounded by the crystals that contain everything worth preserving from their civilization. The infant sleeps peacefully, unaware that he is about to embark on the longest journey in the history of sentient life, a passage from one world to another that will last for years and emerge into a future that neither parent can imagine. "He will do great things," Lara whispers, her hand pressed against the ship's transparent hull. "He will be a bridge between worlds, a symbol of hope for those who need it most." Jor-El activates the launch sequence with hands that remain steady despite the knowledge that this action will separate him forever from the most precious thing in either of their lives. "He will remember us," he says, though the words carry more hope than certainty, "and through him, Krypton will live." The starship rises from their tower just as the final seismic cascade begins, its engines carrying Kal-El away from his birth world at velocities that compress time itself. From his biochamber, the infant can see Krypton growing smaller behind him, a jewel of crystalline beauty that catches and refracts Rao's light, even as its internal structure tears apart under stresses that no amount of scientific advancement could ultimately overcome. The explosion, when it comes, is visible across light-years of space. For just an instant, Rao has a binary companion, a new star born from the death of worlds, burning with the accumulated glory of 10,000 years of achievement, compressed into a single moment of unbearable brightness. Then darkness claims the space where Krypton once turned in its ancient orbit, and the starship carrying the last son of a dead world continues its journey toward a yellow sun and a destiny that neither science nor prophecy could have foretold. In the silence of the void, surrounded by the crystals that contain his heritage and guided by navigation systems that will deliver him safely to his new home, Kal-El sleeps on. He dreams, perhaps, of the red sky under which he was born, or the voices of parents who loved him enough to send him away. But when he wakes, It will be to a different sun, a different world, and the beginning of a story that will transform the very meaning of hope throughout the universe. The age of Krypton has ended. The age of Superman is about to begin. Kansas sunrise, the Kents. The cornfield stretches toward the horizon like a living cathedral, its green walls reaching skyward in perfect rows that speak of human patience and the kind of faith that plants seeds in spring and trusts summer to deliver promises. October's harvest moon hangs low over Smallville, Kansas, casting silver light through the corn silk and transforming the familiar landscape into something that seems touched by magic. It's the kind of night that makes farmers pause in their evening chores to remember why they chose to tie their lives to the rhythm of seasons and the ancient covenant between earth and sky. Jonathan Kent drives his pickup truck down the gravel road that borders his property with the careful attention of a man who has learned to read the subtle language of his land. 37 years of farming have taught him to notice when something doesn't belong, whether it's the wrong bird call at the wrong hour or the way moonlight reflects off something that shouldn't be there. Tonight, the corn speaks of disturbance. The rows near his southern boundary stand broken, stalks bent and flattened in a perfect circle as if some tremendous weight had fallen from heaven itself. Martha Kent sits beside her husband, her nurse's instincts already alert to possibilities that Jonathan's practical mind hasn't yet considered. She has seen enough emergencies in Smallville's small hospital to know that when the impossible intrudes upon the ordinary, human compassion becomes the most important skill anyone can possess. The glow visible through the corn too bright for a bonfire, too steady for lightning, carries the promise of something that will challenge everything they thought they knew about the world. There, Martha points toward the disturbance, her voice carrying the quiet authority that comes from years of making life and death decisions in situations where hesitation can cost everything. Something's burning, or glowing. We should call the sheriff. Jonathan slows the truck but doesn't stop. His practical mind catalogs possibilities: crashed aircraft, experimental military technology, some kind of industrial accident involving chemicals that glow in the dark. But beneath the surface, rationality that has guided him through 4 decades of life, something deeper stirs, something that recognizes this moment as the hinge upon which his future will turn. "Let's take a look first," he says, pulling the truck off the road and into the gap that has been carved through his corn. The headlights reveal a trail of flattened stalks leading towards something that defies easy categorization. Could be someone hurt in there. They leave the truck running and walk toward the source of the glow, their feet crunching through broken corn stalks and earth that still radiates heat from whatever impact created this perfect circle of destruction. The smell in the air is cleanozone and something else, something that reminds Martha of the moment just after lightning strikes close enough to feel. Then they see it. The object nestled in the crater at the center of the disturbance looks like no earthly technology either of them has ever encountered. Its hullaf, that's what the smooth, crystalline surface can be called, gleams with an internal radiance that seems to pulse in rhythm with some vast heartbeat. Symbols that might be writing cover its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they were designed for eyes capable of perceiving more than the limited spectrum available to human vision. But it's the sound emerging from within the object that stops them both in their tracks, faint but unmistakable. Filtering through whatever material comprises the hull comes the crying of a baby. Martha's maternal instincts override every other consideration. She approaches the object with the fearless determination of a woman who has spent years caring for the helpless and vulnerable. Her hands find what might be an access panel, though the symbols that flow across its surface mean nothing to her. She presses her palms against the warm crystal, and something remarkable happens. The hull becomes transparent, revealing the interior and the tiny form within. The infant floats in a pool of golden light that seems to support him like liquid made from sunbeams. He appears perfectly humanto: arms, 2 legs, a face that speaks of vulnerability and innocence in a universal language that transcends species or star systems. But there's something else, something that sets him apart from any child either Kent has ever seen. His eyes, when they open to regard these strange new faces, reflect depths that seem older than his apparent age should allow. "My God," Jonathan whispers, his farmer's pragmatism warring with the evidence of his own senses. "How is this possible?" The answer, if there is one, lies in the crystals scattered around the infant's resting place. They pulse with recorded information languages and histories and the accumulated wisdom of a civilization that achieved greatness beyond human imagination before succumbing to forces beyond any science to control. But that knowledge remains locked away, waiting for the day when their contents can be properly decoded. For now, there is only the immediate reality of a child who needs care, warmth, and the kind of love that asks no questions about origin or purpose. Martha reaches into the light without hesitation, her hands lifting the infant from his crystalline cradle. The moment her skin touches his, the glow fades, and the object that carried him across the void becomes nothing more than an inert shell of alien metal. The baby settles into her arms with the natural ease of a child who recognizes safety when he finds it. His crying stops, replaced by the kind of contented gurgling that speaks of basic needs being met and fundamental trust being established. In Martha's embrace, he is not the last survivor of a dead world or the carrier of impossible genetic heritage. He is simply a baby who needs someone to care for him. "We have to call someone," Jonathan says, though his voice lacks conviction. "Child services, maybe the FBI. Someone needs to know about this." Martha looks down at the infant in her arms, studying his peaceful face in the truck's headlight beams. She thinks of the questions that would follow any official report, the examinations and tests, and bureaucratic machinery that would reduce this miracle to a case file and a series of scientific problems to be solved. She thinks of laboratories and government facilities, and all the ways that wonder can be transformed into something cold and clinical. "We can't," she says finally. "Look at him, Jonathan. Really look. Does this seem like something the government should handle?" Jonathan does look, and in the infant's face he sees something that bypasses his rational mind entirely. Perhaps it's the way the child's eyes seem to focus on him with unusual intensity, or the strange sense of recognition that passes between them. Perhaps it's simply the accumulated wisdom of a man who has learned to trust his instincts when dealing with things that can't be easily explained or categorized. They bring the baby home that night, along with the crystals that fell with him. In their farmhouse kitchen, warmed by the coal stove that has served 3 generations of Kents, they care for their unexpected visitor with the competence that comes from years of dealing with orphaned animals and unexpected responsibilities. Martha heats formula while Jonathan examines the crystals under his reading lamp, trying to understand symbols that seem to shift and change when he's not looking directly at them. The infant accepts their care with a trust that humbles them both. He drinks his bottle, submits to diaper changes, and sleeps in the Moses basket that Martha retrieves from their bedroom closet, a relic from hopes that were never fulfilled, now serving a purpose that neither of them could have imagined. It's during that first night, as they take turns watching over their unexpected guest, that the first signs of his unusual nature begin to manifest. The baby's body temperature runs several degrees higher than human normal, but he shows no signs of fever or distress. When he cries, the windows rattle with harmonics that no human throat should be able to produce. And when morning sunlight first touches his face through the kitchen window, his eyes glow with a warmth that seems to come from within. "He's not from here," Martha says, stating the obvious with the matter-of-fact acceptance that characterizes her approach to life's challenges. "That doesn't matter. He's ours now." Jonathan nods, watching the infant's fascination with the dust motes dancing in the morning light. "We'll need to give him a name, something that sounds normal." They consider options through the morning hours as the baby sleeps peacefully in his basket. Traditional family names, saints' names, something strong but not ostentatious, distinctive but not so unusual as to draw unwanted attention. Finally, Martha suggests Clark after her maiden name, a link to family history that will help anchor this extraordinary child to the ordinary world where he must learn to live. Clark Kent. Jonathan tests the sound of it, rolling the syllables around in his mouth like a farmer evaluating seed quality. Sounds like someone who could grow up to do good things. The decision to raise him as their own comes naturally, without discussion or debate. They are people who understand responsibility, the kind that comes not from legal obligation, but from the simple recognition that some gifts arrive without instruction manuals, and the only proper response is to do your best and trust that love will fill in the gaps. Over the following weeks, as Clark grows stronger under the Kansas sun, they begin to understand the magnitude of what they've undertaken. His developmental milestones arrive with supernatural speed, sitting up unassisted at 3 months, walking before his first birthday, speaking in complete sentences while other children his age are still learning to say mama. His strength manifests in subtle ways at first. Toys that break when he squeezes them too enthusiastically, furniture that shifts when he leans against it, doors that require increasingly sturdy locks as his curious nature combines with abilities that seem to grow stronger each day. But it's his character that truly sets him apart. Even as a toddler, Clark demonstrates an intuitive understanding of right and wrong that goes beyond anything taught or learned. He comforts other children who are hurt or frightened. He refuses to use his growing strength against anything weaker than himself. He responds to discipline not with rebellion but with genuine remorse, as if disappointing the people who love him is the worst punishment imaginable. The Kents shape his development with the patient wisdom of people who understand that great power requires even greater responsibility. They teach him to control his strength through farm chores that gradually increase in difficulty and complexity. They guide his moral education through the stories and values that have sustained their family for generations. Most importantly, they give him the gift of unconditional love, the secure foundation that will allow him to face whatever challenges await him as he grows into his extraordinary destiny. Years pass, and Clark Kent grows from infant to child to teenager under the watchful eyes of parents who never stop marveling at the privilege of raising someone so remarkable. The crystals that came with him remain hidden in the storm cellar, waiting for the day when their secrets can be safely revealed. For now, it's enough that their son is happy, healthy, and learning to be the kind of person who will use his gifts in service of others. The age of Krypton ended in fire and loss, but the age of Superman begins here, in a Kansas farmhouse, with the simple recognition that love is the most powerful force in any universe. Trials of a Smallville Teen. The autumn of Clark Kent's 16th year arrives with a kind of perfect October weather that makes Kansas farmers grateful for their choice to tie their lives to the land. The corn stands ready for harvest in fields that stretch toward horizons painted gold by morning sun, and the air carries the scent of wood smoke and apple orchards heavy with fruit. It's the season when Smallville High School's football team traditionally begins its march toward the state championship, and the entire town focuses its attention on Friday night lights and the dreams that small communities invest in their young athletes. Clark stands in the equipment room beneath the stadium bleachers, holding his shoulder pads with hands that could crush steel but handle the protective gear as gently as if it were made from spun glass. Around him, his teammates prepare for practice with the familiar rituals of teenage masculinity, boastful jokes about weekend conquests, detailed analyses of opposing teams' weaknesses, and the kind of casual cruelty that passes for humor when boys are trying too hard to prove their developing manhood. "Come on, Kent," calls Tommy Morrison, the team captain whose father owns the largest grain elevator in 3 counties. "Coach wants the first string on the field in 5 minutes. That includes you, assuming you can remember not to trip over your own feet." The joke draws laughs from the other players, though they carry an edge of something that might be nervousness. Clark has been a member of the varsity squad for 2 years now, but his teammates have never quite figured out how to categorize him. He's bigger than most of them, stronger than any of them, yet he moves with a precision that makes their coordinator coaches envious. During scrimmages, he demonstrates an uncanny ability to be exactly where the ball is going to be, as if he can see plays developing several seconds before they actually happen. But it's his restraint that truly sets him apart. In a sport that rewards controlled violence and the willingness to impose your will on an opponent through superior strength or speed, Clark plays with a carefulness that borders on the supernatural. He never quite tackles as hard as he could. He never quite runs as fast as he's capable of. He catches passes that should be impossible to reach, but always in ways that can be attributed to luck or exceptional timing rather than abilities that defy explanation. "Sorry, Tommy," Clark replies, pulling his jersey over shoulder pads that required special reinforcement after he accidentally bent the standard equipment during his first practice. "Just making sure everything fits properly." The lie comes easily, though it tastes bitter in his mouth. The truth that he's been mentally calculating exactly how much force he can apply without seriously injuring his opponents would sound insane to anyone who heard it. How do you explain to 16-year-old teammates that your greatest challenge isn't mastering the playbook or developing your skills, but learning to hold back enough strength to level an entire city block. Practice proceeds with the controlled chaos that characterizes high school athletics. Coach Henderson, a former college linebacker whose playing career ended with a knee injury that left him permanently bitter about wasted potential, drives his players through drills designed to build both physical conditioning and the kind of mental toughness that separates winners from everyone else. "Kent," Henderson's voice cuts across the practice field like a whip crack. "You're playing like you're afraid to get your uniform dirty. This is football, not ballet. Hit somebody like you mean it." Clark nods and lines up for the next drill, though every muscle in his body rebels against the idea of hitting someone like he means it. The player across from him, Billy Patterson, whose family has farmed the same land for 4 generations, weighs maybe 160 pounds soaking wet. A proper tackle from Clark would send Billy flying into the next county, assuming it didn't simply break every bone in his body. Instead, Clark moderates his strength with the precision of a surgeon, applying just enough force to complete the drill while ensuring that his opponent suffers nothing more serious than wounded pride. To outside observers, it looks like textbook technique. To Clark, it feels like the most complex performance he's ever attempted. The real test comes during the scrimmage that concludes each practice. Clark's team, wearing red jerseys, faces off against the white team in a series of plays designed to simulate game conditions. Henderson watches from the sidelines, clipboard in hand, making notes about player performance and mental toughness that will determine who starts in Friday's game against the Granville Wildcats. Clark takes his position at wide receiver, studying the defensive formation with vision that can discern details invisible to human perception. He sees the cornerback who's supposed to cover him favoring his left ankle, a minor injury that will limit his cutting ability on deep routes. He notices the safety cheating toward the run, leaving a gap in coverage that should provide an easy touchdown if the quarterback recognizes the opportunity. The snap count echoes across the practice field, and Clark runs his route with movements calibrated to appear impressively athletic, without revealing the full extent of his capabilities. The pass arrives exactly where he expected it would, thrown slightly behind him in an attempt to test his concentration and ball-handling skills. Time seems to slow as Clark tracks the football's rotation, calculating trajectory and timing with mathematical precision. He could easily accelerate beyond human limits, positioning himself for a perfect catch that would leave his defenders grasping at empty air. Instead, he adjusts his position with movements that appear natural, allowing the cornerback to remain close enough to make the play look competitive. The catch itself requires more acting than athletics. Clark has to moderate not just his speed and strength, but his reaction time, allowing the ball to arrive before he begins his catching motion, rather than starting the movement before the quarterback has even completed his throw. The result is a reception that draws appreciative comments from coaches and teammates, while remaining within the boundaries of what exceptionally talented high school athletes might reasonably accomplish. It's after practice, in the quiet moments when his teammates have departed for part-time jobs and family obligations, that Clark allows himself to truly move. Alone on the practice field, with only the evening sky as witness, he runs routes at speeds that would break every existing record for human locomotion. He leaps to catch imaginary passes at heights that would be impossible for anyone bound by normal gravitational constraints. For just a few precious minutes, he experiences the freedom of using his abilities without restraint or fear of discovery. But even these private moments are shadowed by awareness of the fine line he must walk. Too much difference, too much superiority, and his carefully constructed normal life will collapse under the weight of questions he cannot answer. The town of Smallville has embraced Clark Kent as one of their own, the quiet farm boy who works hard, treats everyone with respect, and demonstrates the kind of character that makes small communities proud of their young people. Revealing his true nature would transform their acceptance into fear, their pride into suspicion, their love into something that might destroy the only home he's ever known. The balance becomes even more precarious during the game against Granville. Friday night, lights illuminate the field where Clark has learned to perform the most complex deception of his young life, pretending to be nothing more than a gifted athlete playing a game he could dominate with embarrassing ease. The bleachers overflow with family and friends whose expectations rest on the shoulders of young men barely old enough to drive. Metropolis Day 1. The city rises from the horizon, like humanity's boldest declaration of its own potential, a testament, in glass and steel, to the species' refusal to be contained by the limitations that once defined civilization's boundaries. Metropolis stretches skyward, with the ambitious confidence of a society that has learned to dream in vertical dimensions, its towers reaching toward clouds that seem almost within touching distance of the highest observation decks. Clark Kent emerges from Grand Central Station carrying a single suitcase and wearing his best suit, the one Martha insisted on buying for his college interviews, though Columbia University never seemed quite as important as this moment when he first sets foot in the city that will define the rest of his life. The crowds that surge around him move with purposeful energy that speaks to opportunities and ambitions far grander than anything Smallville ever offered. Yet he feels no intimidation in their presence. If anything, the urban symphony of voices and footsteps and distant sirens sounds almost like welcome. The Daily Planet building dominates the skyline with architectural grandeur that announces its importance before any visitor reads the name carved into its marble foundation. The globe that crowns its Art Deco summit catches morning sunlight and transforms it into a beacon visible from miles away, symbol of information flowing freely across a world hungry for truth and understanding. For Clark, approaching its entrance with carefully rehearsed humility, it represents something more personal, the chance to build a life that serves others while maintaining the anonymity that his alter ego will require. Perry White's office occupies a corner of the newsroom that offers panoramic views of the city spreading toward distant horizons. The editor-in-chief sits behind a desk that looks like the command center of someone accustomed to making decisions that affect millions of readers, surrounded by the organized chaos of a man who processes information faster than most people can acquire it. His reputation precedes him, the legendary journalist who broke the LUTHOR corruption scandal 5 years ago, the editor whose investigative teams have won more Pulitzer Prizes than any other newspaper in the country. Kent, isn't it? Perry's voice carries the gruff authority of someone who has spent decades separating genuine talent from mere ambition. Kansas boy, corn-fed and earnest. Let me guess you think journalism is about truth, justice, and serving the public good. Clark settles into the chair across from Perry's desk, fighting the urge to adjust his glasses, a nervous habit he's cultivated to make his civilian identity appear more vulnerable than his true nature might suggest. I think journalism is about giving people the information they need to make informed decisions about their lives and their world. The answer draws a grunt that might be approval from Perry, though his expression remains skeptical. Pretty words, farm boy, but this isn't the Smallville Gazette. In Metropolis, stories come at you faster than you can type them, and half the people you interview are lying about something important. You think you can handle that kind of pressure? The interview that follows encompasses 3 hours of questions that probe everything from Clark's educational background to his moral philosophy. Perry tests his knowledge of current events, his writing ability, and his willingness to pursue stories that might make powerful people uncomfortable. Throughout it all, Clark projects the image he's carefully crafted, a talented but inexperienced reporter whose greatest assets are his integrity and his refusal to be intimidated by wealth or political influence. There's one more thing, Perry says as the interview winds toward its conclusion. We've got a new reporter starting next week. Lois Lane, best investigative journalist I've seen in 20 years, and she's got the attitude to match her talent. If I hire you, you'll probably be working with her on some stories. Think you can handle a partner who's smarter than you and not afraid to let you know it? Clark's smile carries genuine warmth rather than the false confidence that characterizes most job interviews. I've learned a lot from people who are smarter than me. Usually, they make me better at whatever we're working on together. The response earns him a job offer that arrives with conditions and expectations that would terrify most journalism school graduates. Perry White doesn't hire assistants or apprentices, she hires reporters who are expected to produce professional quality work from their first day on the job. The Daily Planet's reputation depends on maintaining standards that other newspapers can only aspire to reach. Clark's first assignment arrives before he's even finished filling out his employment paperwork. A chemical explosion at the Metropolis harbor has sent toxic clouds drifting toward residential neighborhoods, and emergency responders are struggling to contain the damage while evacuating civilians from the danger zone. It's exactly the kind of breaking news story that separates real journalists from those who merely want to write about journalism. Lane's already on her way to the scene, Perry explains, handing Clark a press badge that still smells of fresh laminating plastic. Find her. Try not to get in her way, and see if you can contribute something useful to whatever story she's developing. Consider it your audition for whether you belong here. The taxi ride to Metropolis Harbor provides Clark with his first opportunity to study the city that will become his adopted home, with the enhanced senses that normal humans cannot access. Through vision that can penetrate buildings and hearing that can isolate individual conversations from blocks away, he begins to map the urban landscape in ways that will prove invaluable in the months to come. But it's the scope of human activity that truly impresses him. Millions of people pursuing their individual dreams and ambitions, creating a collective energy that seems to pulse through the very foundations of the city. Students attending universities that house more books than some entire countries. Scientists working in laboratories that push the boundaries of human knowledge. Artists creating works that challenge and inspire audiences around the world. Metropolis represents humanity at its most ambitious and creative, a living testament to the species' refusal to accept limitations on its potential for growth and achievement. The Harbor District, when Clark finally arrives, presents a very different face of urban life. Industrial facilities stretch along the waterfront, processing the raw materials and manufactured goods that keep a modern city functioning. The chemical plant that has become the center of today's emergency occupies several acres of heavily secured property, surrounded by the kind of fencing and warning signs that suggest the materials contained within could cause significant harm if improperly handled. Clark spots Lois Lane before she notices him, a woman in her late 20s, moving through the chaos of emergency responders with the confidence of someone accustomed to finding stories in the midst of crisis. Her dark hair is pulled back in a practical style that won't interfere with her work, and she wears clothes that balance professional appearance with the kind of durability required for field reporting. But it's her intensity that truly sets her apart, the focused energy of someone who views every situation as a puzzle that can be solved through the proper application of intelligence and determination. "You must be Kent," she says without preamble when he approaches her position behind the emergency command post. "Perry said he was sending me a rookie. Hope you've got strong stomach. This could get messy before it gets better." The explosion that created their current crisis originated in a storage facility containing industrial solvents that were never intended to mix with open air. The resulting chemical reaction has produced clouds of vapor that range from merely toxic to potentially lethal, depending on concentration and exposure duration. Emergency teams are working to contain the spread while evacuating everyone within a 3-mile radius. But the wind patterns keep shifting in ways that make their job nearly impossible. "What's the story?" Clark asks, pulling out a notebook that he hopes makes him look appropriately prepared for serious journalism work. Lois points toward the chemical plant's main building, where figures in hazmat suits move with urgent purpose through smoke that obscures most details. That depends on whether this was an accident or something more deliberate. The plant has had safety violations for the past 18 months, but LexCorp bought them out 6 weeks ago. Could be coincidence, could be corporate negligence, could be something worse. The name LexCorp resonates with recognition that Clark has gained from months of research into Metropolis business and politics. Lex Luthor's corporate empire spans dozens of industries, from advanced technology development to basic manufacturing, all overseen by a man whose brilliance is matched only by his apparent belief that normal rules don't apply to people of his exceptional capabilities. As they work together to gather information from emergency responders and evacuated residents, Clark begins to understand why Perry White spoke of Lois Lane with such respect. Her questions cut directly to the heart of complex issues, revealing connections and implications that less experienced reporters would miss entirely. She approaches every interview with preparation that suggests hours of background research, and she remembers details that would escape most people's notice. But it's her fearlessness that truly impresses him. When other reporters maintain safe distances from the chemical clouds, Lois moves closer to get better views of the response efforts. When officials try to limit her access to information, she finds alternative sources who can provide the details that paint a complete picture of the crisis. She treats dangerous situations as problems to be solved, rather than obstacles to be avoided. The real test of their partnership comes when the wind shifts unexpectedly. carrying toxic vapors directly toward an elementary school that was deemed far enough from the plant to avoid evacuation. Emergency responders, already stretched beyond their capacity, cannot reach the school quickly enough to safely evacuate 300 children and their teachers before the chemical cloud arrives. Clark recognizes the moment when journalism must yield to heroism. While Lois continues gathering information that will eventually become their article, he excuses himself with mumbled explanations about checking another angle on the story. What he actually does is find the nearest private space-an alley between two warehouse buildings where he can shed his civilian identity without being observed. The transformation from Clark Kent to Superman takes mere seconds, but it represents a threshold that he has been approaching for months without quite finding the courage to cross. The costume that emerged from his fortress of solitude fits him perfectly, moving with his body as if it were a second skin rather than external clothing. The cape flows behind him with symbolic weight that seems to announce his intentions to the world. His first public flight occurs at speeds that compress the distance between harbor and school into something measurable in heartbeats rather than minutes. The children, visible through classroom windows as small figures pressed against glass, watch in amazement as a figure in red and blue descends from the sky like something from their most optimistic dreams. The evacuation itself becomes a masterpiece of precision and care. Superman, though, he doesn't yet know that name lifts groups of children with such gentleness that none of them experience even momentary fear. His movements through the school hallways flow with practiced efficiency, as if he has rehearsed this exact scenario hundreds of times. Within minutes, every child and adult has been transported to safety zones far beyond the reach of any chemical contamination. When he returns to the harbor district, Clark finds Lois staring at the sky with an expression that combines professional skepticism with something approaching wonder. She has witnessed the rescue from her position near the emergency command post, watching through binoculars as someone accomplished what should have been impossible. "Did you see that?" she asks when Clark reappears beside her, having changed back into his civilian clothes in the same alley where his heroic career began. "See what?" Clark responds, though his enhanced hearing has already detected the dozens of conversations occurring throughout the area: emergency responders, evacuated residents, and journalists all struggling to process what they've witnessed. Lois describes the figure she observed: a man flying without any visible means of propulsion, moving with speed and precision that defied explanation, demonstrating strength that allowed him to carry multiple people simultaneously without apparent effort. Her account carries the careful detail of someone trained to observe and record, but also the excitement of a journalist who recognizes that she may have witnessed something genuinely unprecedented. "There's no official confirmation yet," she continues, "but I've talked to a dozen witnesses who all describe the same thing. Someone with extraordinary abilities just saved 300 lives. That's not just a news story, that's the beginning of something completely new." Clark nods with the appropriate mixture of interest and skepticism that any professional journalist would display when confronted with claims that seem to challenge basic understanding of what's possible. But privately, he savors the moment when his childhood dreams of helping people finally became reality. The rescue felt natural, almost inevitable, as if 18 years of preparation had led to this precise point when the world first glimpsed what he might become. Their article, published the following morning under both their bylines, carefully balances eyewitness accounts with appropriately cautious language about unverified claims and the need for further investigation. But Lois's instincts prove correct. The story generates response that exceeds anything either of them anticipated. Letters pour in from readers across the country, sharing their own accounts of mysterious rescues and inexplicable assistance that suggest Superman's activities may not be limited to single, isolated incidents. It's Lois who suggests the name during their third day of follow-up reporting. "Superman," she says, testing the sound of it while they review interview transcripts in the Daily Planet's newsroom. "Someone with extraordinary abilities who uses them to help people." It fits what witnesses are describing. Clark adjusts his glasses, the nervous habit that helps maintain his mild-mannered facade while privately wondering how it feels to inadvertently name yourself. It sounds a little dramatic, maybe too much like comic book fiction. "The best names usually do," Lois replies with the confidence of someone who has learned to trust her instincts about language and symbolism. But sometimes reality becomes dramatic enough to justify dramatic names. If this person is real, if he continues doing what witnesses claim he's been doing, then Superman might be exactly the right word for what he represents. The conversation ends with both reporters returning to their respective assignments, but Clark carries the name with him as he continues his careful exploration of what it means to be a hero in a world that desperately needs saving. Superman, the word, resonates with possibilities that extend far beyond single rescues or isolated acts of heroism. It suggests something larger, more systematic, more committed to the protection of innocent life. That evening, standing in his small apartment overlooking Metropolis's skyline, Clark Kent contemplates the future that seems to be approaching with increasing inevitability. The boy from Smallville who dreamed of helping people has found himself in exactly the right place to transform those dreams into reality. The city spreads before him like a promise, waiting to be fulfilled. Millions of people pursuing their individual hopes, while remaining vulnerable to threats that no normal human could possibly address. The age of Superman has begun, though it will take time for the world to fully understand what that means. For now, it's enough that Clark Kent has found his calling, Lois Lane has found her story, and Metropolis has gained a protector whose commitment to justice will prove stronger than any force that threatens the innocent. Lex Luthor, brilliance turned blade. The penthouse office that crowns the LexCorp Tower offers a view of Metropolis that encompasses the entire scope of human ambition made manifest in steel and glass. From this height, the city appears conquerable collection of individual structures that could be reshaped according to the vision of someone with sufficient intelligence, resources, and will to impose order upon chaos. It's a perspective that appeals to Lex Luthor's fundamental understanding of his relationship with the world. Problems exist to be solved, obstacles exist to be overcome, and lesser minds exist to be guided by those capable of seeing solutions that escape ordinary perception. The man who built this empire from nothing more than intellect and determination stands silhouetted against floor-to-ceiling windows that frame his domain like a portrait of conquest made real. At 34, Lex Luthor represents the absolute pinnacle of human achievement, a polymath whose innovations span everything from advanced computer systems to revolutionary medical treatments, whose business acumen has created the largest privately held corporation in the world, whose philanthropic efforts have transformed Metropolis from declining industrial center into the crown jewel of American urban development. But it's the tragedy that forged his character that truly explains the man who will become Superman's greatest enemy. The Luthor Mansion fire occurred when Alexander Joseph Luthor was 11 years old, a conflagration that consumed not just the family estate but both of his parents, leaving him to watch helplessly as flames devoured everything that had defined his young life. The official investigation concluded that faulty electrical wiring caused the blaze, but Lex's 11-year-old mind, already operating at levels that amazed child psychologists, identified 17 different factors that could have prevented the tragedy if the adults responsible had possessed sufficient intelligence and foresight. The lesson he learned that night would shape every decision for the rest of his life. Incompetence kills, and the only reliable protection against catastrophe is personal excellence that refuses to depend on anyone else's capabilities. Trust is a luxury that only the naive can afford. Power is the only currency that retains its value when everything else fails. The years that followed the fire read like a case study in what human potential can accomplish when freed from the limitations that constrain ordinary ambition. Lex completed his high school education in 18 months, while simultaneously earning undergraduate degrees in electrical engineering and biochemistry. His first patent, filed at age 16, revolutionized computer memory storage and generated enough revenue to fund his expansion into biotechnology research. By 25, he had transformed a modest inheritance into a corporate empire that employed more than 50,000 people worldwide. But it was his return to Metropolis 5 years ago that marked the beginning of his true legacy. The city that welcomed him back had fallen far from its former glory. Industrial decline, rising crime rates, and municipal corruption had transformed what was once America's most optimistic urban center into something approaching despair. Local newspapers spoke openly of managed decline, population exodus, and the inevitable transformation of Metropolis into another Rust Belt casualty. Lex Luthor refused to accept such limitations. His first initiative involved the complete reconstruction of downtown Metropolis, according to architectural plans that he personally reviewed and modified. The LexCorp Tower that now dominates the skyline represents only the most visible aspect of an urban renewal project that encompassed everything from transportation infrastructure to cultural institutions. Museums, universities, medical centers all bearing his name, all designed according to his vision of what human civilization could become under proper leadership. The philanthropic efforts that accompanied this reconstruction earned him recognition as one of the world's foremost humanitarian leaders. The Luthor Foundation's medical research has produced treatments for diseases that previously carried automatic death sentences. His educational initiatives have created scholarship programs that have sent thousands of disadvantaged students to the finest universities in the world. His environmental projects have pioneered technologies that promise to solve pollution problems that governments have proven incapable of addressing. Yet for all his public acclaim and genuine achievements, Lex Luthor remains fundamentally isolated by the very intelligence that makes his success possible. He inhabits a world where he is surrounded by people whose cognitive limitations prevent them from understanding not just his methods, but his motivations. Board meetings become exercises in patience as he explains concepts that should be obvious to anyone with basic reasoning skills. Romantic relationships founder on the impossibility of finding intellectual equals who can appreciate both his achievements and his ambitions. The isolation breeds a philosophical perspective that will prove crucial to understanding his eventual conflict with Superman. In Lex's worldview, exceptional individuals bear responsibility for guiding lesser minds toward optimal outcomes, even when those lesser minds cannot appreciate the wisdom of such guidance. Democracy is a pleasant fiction that allows ordinary people to feel important, while their betters make the decisions that actually determine society's direction. Laws exist to constrain the mediocre while providing flexibility for those intelligent enough to understand when conventional rules must yield to larger purposes. It's this perspective that explains his reaction to the first credible reports of Superman's activities. The morning edition of the Daily Planet lies open on his mahogany desk, its headlines announcing the impossible rescue at Metropolis Elementary School, with the kind of breathless excitement that suggests the reporters have encountered something genuinely unprecedented. Lex reads Lois Lane's account with the careful attention that he applies to all potentially significant developments, his analytical mind automatically categorizing possibilities and implications. "Mercy," he calls to his personal assistant, a woman whose loyalty has been earned through years of recognition that working for Lex Luthor provides access to resources and opportunities unavailable anywhere else in the corporate world. "What's our security analysis of yesterday's chemical plant incident?" Mercy Graves approaches with the kind of efficient precision that characterizes all of LexCorp's operations. Her background includes advanced degrees in both security management and applied psychology, qualifications that make her uniquely capable of anticipating her employer's needs while managing the complex logistics of protecting someone whose prominence makes him a target for every form of threat imaginable. "Our forensic team finished their preliminary review this morning," she reports, consulting a tablet that contains information classified at levels that would require federal security clearance to access. The explosion originated in a storage area that contained industrial solvents purchased through a subsidiary acquisition last month. Initial evidence suggests equipment failure rather than deliberate sabotage. Lex nods, though his attention remains focused on the newspaper article that has captured his interest. "And the rescue? The figure that witnesses claim flew children to safety?" Mercy's expression becomes carefully neutral, professional demeanor of someone who has learned to present information without editorial comment, leaving interpretation to minds more qualified than her own. 17 separate witnesses provided consistent accounts of an individual demonstrating capabilities that exceed known human limitations. Flight without visible propulsion, strength sufficient to carry multiple people simultaneously, speed that allowed evacuation of the entire school in under 6 minutes. The implications cascade through Lex's consciousness with mathematical precision. If the reports are accurate and the consistency of witness accounts suggests they probably are, then someone with abilities far exceeding human norms has chosen to intervene in Metropolis affairs. The questions that follow are more troubling than the initial revelation. Who is this individual? What are the full extent of his capabilities? Most importantly, what authority granted him the right to make unilateral decisions about when and how to help people? Run a complete background analysis. Lex instructs, his voice carrying the calm authority that has guided LexCorp through 2 decades of expansion and innovation. Cross-reference. All reported sightings with security camera footage, cell phone videos, and any government surveillance that might have captured this individual's activities. I want to know everything: where he comes from, what he wants, and whether he represents opportunity or threat. The investigation that follows encompasses resources that would strain the capabilities of most government agencies. LexCorp's security division operates with funding and technology that rival intelligence services, staffed by former military and law enforcement personnel whose expertise covers everything from electronic surveillance to behavioral analysis. Within weeks, they have compiled a dossier that chronicles Superman's activities across several months of gradually increasing public visibility. The pattern that emerges both fascinates and disturbs Lex's analytical mind. Superman appears to operate according to moral principles that prioritize individual human welfare over larger systemic considerations. He saves people from immediate physical danger: burning buildings, traffic accidents, natural disasters, but shows no interest in addressing the underlying social and economic factors that create such dangers in the first place. His interventions are reactive rather than proactive, responsive rather than strategic. More troubling still is the apparent randomness of his activities. Superman doesn't seem to operate according to any identifiable selection criteria for determining which emergencies deserve his attention. He responds to spectacular visible crises while ignoring less dramatic but potentially more significant problems. A woman trapped in a collapsed building receives immediate assistance, while thousands of people struggling with poverty or inadequate medical care remain beyond his notice. He's naive, Lex concludes during a board meeting where LexCorp's senior executives discuss the implications of Superman's presence for their ongoing civic improvement projects. Someone with his capabilities could solve fundamental problems rather than just treating symptoms. He could eliminate crime by addressing its root causes. He could end hunger by optimizing food distribution systems. He could prevent wars by establishing rational governance structures that serve everyone's interests. The board members nod with the appropriate mixture of respect and incomprehension that characterizes most of their interactions with Lex's strategic thinking. They understand that their continued employment depends on agreeing with his assessments while implementing whatever initiatives he deems appropriate. None of them possess the intellectual capacity to appreciate the broader implications of Superman's inefficient approach to problem solving. But Lex understands, and understanding breeds resentment that grows stronger with each passing day. Here is someone blessed with abilities that could transform human civilization, yet he chooses to waste his potential on small-scale interventions that leave fundamental problems untouched. It's like watching a surgeon use his skills to apply band-aids instead of performing life-saving operations technically helpful, but representing a tragic misallocation of irreplaceable resources. The resentment deepens into something approaching hatred when Lex recognizes the public's reaction to Superman's activities. Newspaper editorials praise the mysterious hero in language that borders on worship. Television commentators speculate about whether Superman represents some kind of evolutionary advancement that proves humanity's potential for greatness. Religious leaders debate whether his appearance fulfills ancient prophecies about saviors arriving in times of greatest need. None of them acknowledge the irony that someone who has actually devoted his life to improving human welfare, who has created jobs, funded research, built institutions that serve millions of people, receives far less recognition than this amateur who appears and disappears according to whims that no one can predict or influence. Lex Luthor has spent 20 years methodically improving Metropolis through careful planning and massive resource allocation, yet citizens seem more excited about Superman's random acts of intervention than LexCorp's systematic approach to urban development. The final catalyst for open conflict arrives with Superman's first deliberate investigation of LexCorp activities. A transportation accident involving experimental military technology triggers Superman's intervention, but instead of simply rescuing victims and departing, he remains to examine the wreckage. His investigation reveals safety violations that LexCorp's security team assumed were buried beneath enough bureaucratic complexity to avoid detection. When the Daily Planet publishes articles questioning LexCorp's compliance with federal safety regulations, articles clearly based on information that only Superman could have gathered, Lex recognizes that their conflict has become inevitable. Superman has chosen to position himself as a check on Lex's activities, appointed himself as judge of decisions that should be evaluated only by minds capable of understanding their full complexity. He's declaring war, Lex tells Mercy as they review the newspaper coverage in his penthouse office. Not openly, not honestly, but definitively. He's decided that his moral judgments take precedence over legal authorities, democratic processes, and rational analysis. The war that follows will be fought with weapons more sophisticated than anything either combatant initially realizes. Lex's first efforts involve attempts to discredit Superman through carefully orchestrated media campaigns that question his motivations, his methods, and his right to operate outside normal channels of accountability. But Superman's continued success at saving lives makes such attacks appear petty and self-serving. More direct approaches prove equally frustrating. LexCorp's research division develops technologies designed to neutralize or control individuals with enhanced physical capabilities. But Superman's abilities appear to operate according to principles that defy conventional scientific understanding. Weapons that should be devastating prove ineffective. Traps that should be inescapable fail to contain him. Strategies that should be foolproof somehow allow him to emerge victorious while making Lex appear villainous. The true genius of Lex Luthor's approach to their conflict lies not in any single scheme or weapon, but in his recognition that Superman's greatest vulnerability is his own moral certainty. Someone who operates according to such rigid ethical principles can be manipulated by creating situations where any choice he makes will result in unacceptable consequences. Force him to choose between saving innocent lives and maintaining his moral purity, and his predictable nature becomes a weakness that superior intelligence can exploit. But that understanding will take time to develop and longer still to implement effectively. For now, Lex contents himself with studying his opponent, learning the patterns that govern Superman's behavior, and developing the resources that will eventually allow him to demonstrate the futility of heroism that refuses to acknowledge the necessity of rational leadership. In his penthouse office, surrounded by evidence of everything human intelligence can accomplish when freed from limitation and doubt, Lex Luthor contemplates the future that he will shape according to his vision of optimal outcomes. Superman represents an obstacle to that future random variable that refuses to submit to logical analysis or rational control. But obstacles exist to be overcome, and Lex has never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved through sufficient application of intelligence and will. The age of Superman has begun, but Lex Luthor intends to ensure that it ends according to his terms, rather than humanity's naive hopes for easy salvation. Gallery of Menaces, Volume I. The sewers beneath Metropolis stretch through darkness that has never known sunlight, carrying the city's refuse through tunnels that burrow beneath the foundations of civilization like arteries in some vast, hidden circulatory system. In these depths, where only maintenance workers and urban explorers dare to venture, something that was once human awakens to appetites that transcend normal biological needs. The transformation occurred gradually, cellular modification advancing through stages that medical science would classify as impossible if any doctor survived long enough to study the evidence. John Corbin's death was officially recorded 6 months ago. Construction accident that left his body too damaged for conventional burial. His remains interred in Metropolis Memorial Cemetery beneath a modest headstone that his few remaining relatives could afford. But death, it seems, was merely an interruption rather than an ending. The experimental nanotechnology that LexCorp's research division was developing for military applications found its way into Corbin's system through medical procedures that were never intended to serve as resurrection protocols. The result staggers through the underground tunnels with movements that barely qualify as human locomotion. Metallo, though he doesn't yet know the name that newspapers will give him, represents something unprecedented in the annals of both medicine and criminal pathology. His skeletal structure has been reinforced with metallic implants that provide strength far exceeding human norms. His circulatory system has been replaced by conduits that carry synthetic fluids designed to maintain cybernetic components. Most significantly, his heart has been replaced by a power source that pulses with green radiancy, a fragment of crystalline material that arrived on Earth 37 years ago as part of the debris field from a dying planet. The kryptonite that powers Metallo's artificial cardiovascular system serves as more than mere energy source. Its radiation, harmless to humans but devastating to Kryptonian physiology, transforms him into something approaching Superman's perfect nemesis. Each beat of his mechanical heart pumps energy through his enhanced musculature, while broadcasting wavelengths that weaken and ultimately incapacitate anyone sharing Superman's genetic heritage. But consciousness, when it returns to Corbin's reconstructed mind, brings with it hungers that his original biology never experienced. The cybernetic components that sustain his unnatural existence require constant energy input, and conventional power sources prove inadequate to maintain his enhanced capabilities. He needs something more fundamental: the bioelectric energy that flows through living nervous systems, the spark of consciousness that separates animate from inanimate matter. His first victim is a maintenance worker whose routine inspection of the tunnel systems brings him into contact with something that should not exist. The feeding process proves both efficient and horrifying. Metallo's metallic fingers interface directly with human neural tissue, draining life force with the methodical precision of a machine designed for resource extraction. What remains afterward barely qualifies as human flesh preserved in mockery of life. Consciousness extinguished so completely that even advanced medical intervention cannot restore basic brain function. The attacks escalate in frequency and boldness as Metallo learns to control his enhanced capabilities. Homeless individuals who seek shelter in the tunnels disappear without trace, their life energy absorbed into cybernetic systems that grow stronger with each feeding. Night shift workers in the industrial districts report encounters with something that moves too fast for clear observation, leaving behind only the memory of green light and the metallic taste of fear. Superman's first encounter with Metallo occurs during a rescue operation that seems routine by the standards that his heroic career has established. A subway train experiences catastrophic mechanical failure deep beneath the financial district, trapping 200 passengers in tunnels that fill with smoke from electrical fires. The evacuation should be straightforward. Superman's speed and strength allow him to transport civilians to safety faster than conventional emergency responders could even reach the scene. But as he approaches the disabled train, something unprecedented happens. His strength falters. His speed diminishes to merely human levels. The invulnerability that has protected him from everything from nuclear explosions to deep space radiation suddenly becomes as fragile as normal human flesh. For the first time since childhood, Clark Kent experiences genuine physical vulnerability, and the sensation proves more terrifying than any enemy he has previously faced. Metallo emerges from the tunnel shadows like humanity's nightmare-given skeletal figure that moves with mechanical precision, his chest cavity glowing with radiation that seems to eat away at Superman's very existence. The voice that emerges from his artificial larynx carries harmonics that speak to the electronic components that sustain his consciousness, rather than the vocal cords that once made him human. "You feel it, don't you?" Metallo's words echo through the subway tunnel with metallic resonance that seems to emanate from multiple sources simultaneously. The weakness, the mortality. You're not a god, after all, just another alien pretending to be something you're not. The battle that follows defies every expectation that Superman has developed about his own capabilities. Metallo's strength, while formidable, should be manageable for someone who can move continents. His speed, though enhanced beyond human norms, should be easily overcome by someone who can circle the globe in minutes. But the kryptonite radiation that powers his cybernetic systems creates a zone of effect where Superman's abilities operate at drastically reduced levels. Each exchange of blows reveals new limitations that Superman has never had to consider. Metallo's metallic fists strike with force that actually causes pain, a sensation so unfamiliar that it requires conscious effort to process. His movements, slowed by kryptonite exposure, lack the fluid precision that normally characterizes his combat technique. For the first time in his heroic career, Superman faces the possibility of actual defeat. The trapped passengers complicate every strategic decision. Superman cannot simply retreat to recover his strength while 200 innocent people remain in mortal danger. He cannot risk using his remaining power reserves in ways that might cause tunnel collapse or electrical fires that would kill everyone he's trying to save. The very values that drive his heroism become tactical disadvantages when facing an enemy specifically designed to exploit his moral certainties. Victory, when it finally comes, arrives through intelligence rather than strength. Superman's analysis of Metallo's cybernetic systems reveals that the kryptonite heart, while providing tremendous power, also represents a single point of failure. By using his heat vision in carefully controlled bursts, the one ability that seems least affected by kryptonite radiation, he manages to overload the cooling systems that prevent Metallo's power source from reaching critical temperatures. The explosion that follows illuminates the subway tunnels with green fire that seems to burn without consuming, releasing energy that dissipates into the surrounding rock and metal. Metallo's consciousness, so dependent on electronic components that cannot survive such thermal stress, fragmenting into digital fragments that scatter through the tunnel's electrical systems before finally going dark. But the victory feels hollow as Superman contemplates its implications. For 37 years, he has operated under the assumption that his Kryptonian heritage made him essentially invulnerable to earthly threats. The existence of kryptonite fragments of his birth world that somehow survived its destruction and found their way to Earth fundamentally alters his understanding of his own limitations and vulnerabilities. More troubling still is the realization that someone deliberately created Metallo as an anti-Superman weapon. The cybernetic technology that sustains his existence operates according to principles that suggest access to resources and expertise far beyond anything available to random criminals. Someone with significant scientific capabilities and detailed knowledge of Superman's physiology has chosen to develop weapons specifically designed to neutralize his abilities. The investigation that follows reveals connections to LexCorp research divisions, though the evidence remains too circumstantial for public accusations. Metallo's original identity, as John Corbin, leads to medical records that show experimental treatments. Phantom Zone, General Zod. The discovery occurs during Superman's investigation of archaeological anomalies in the Andes Mountains, where satellite imagery has detected geometric patterns too precise for natural formation, yet too ancient for human origin. What he finds, buried beneath centuries of accumulated ice and stone, defies every assumption he has made about his birth world's complete destruction. The crystalline device that emerges from the excavation site pulses with familiar energy signatures, Kryptonian technology, that somehow survived the journey across space and time to find its way to Earth's surface. The Phantom Zone projector represents one of Krypton's most controversial scientific achievements, a device that can phase matter into a dimensional pocket where time flows differently and physical laws operate according to principles that normal space cannot accommodate. Originally designed as a humane alternative to capital punishment, the Phantom Zone allowed Kryptonian justice to remove dangerous criminals from society without resorting to execution. Prisoners sentenced to the zone existed in a state of suspended animation, conscious but unable to affect the physical world, experiencing the passage of time while remaining forever isolated from the living universe. But as Superman activates the device within his fortress of solitude, guided by genetic memories that surface as his fingers trace control surfaces designed for Kryptonian physiology, he discovers that the zone contains more than historical artifacts and abandoned experiments. The dimensional pocket houses three figures whose presence there speaks to crimes so severe that even Krypton's advanced rehabilitation methods could not address them. General Drew Zod, his Lieutenant Ursa, and the massive non-military officers whose attempted coup against the Science Council resulted in their banishment to a prison that was intended to last for eternity. The revelation that other Kryptonians survived their world's destruction fills Superman with emotions that encompass joy, relief, and growing apprehension as he learns more about why these particular individuals were deemed too dangerous for normal incarceration. General Zod was not merely a military commander, but a visionary whose dedication to Kryptonian supremacy led him to conclude that their people's destiny lay in conquest rather than peaceful coexistence with lesser species. His rebellion against the Council was motivated not by personal ambition, but by philosophical certainty that Kryptonians were destined to rule a galaxy filled with inferior civilizations. The decision to release them from their interdimensional prison becomes Superman's first truly complex moral choice as Earth's protector. These are his people, the only other survivors of a civilization that produced wonders beyond human imagination. They possess knowledge of Kryptonian culture, history, and technology that could help him understand his heritage in ways that the fortress's crystalline databases cannot provide. Most importantly, they represent the possibility that he might no longer be alone in the universe, that the unique burden of being the last of his kind might finally be shared with others who understand what it means to lose everything while gaining power beyond measure. But the warning encoded in the Phantom Zone projector's memory banks makes clear the magnitude of the risk that their release represents. Jor-El's final scientific project before Krypton's destruction included detailed psychological profiles of the zone's most dangerous prisoners, assessments that concluded their rehabilitation was impossible given the fundamental nature of their beliefs about Kryptonian superiority and the proper relationship between advanced and primitive civilizations. The release occurs despite these warnings, motivated by Superman's desperate hope that exposure to Earth's values and his own example of heroic service might inspire redemption in fellow survivors who have spent decades in isolation, contemplating their past choices. The Phantom Zone projector's reversal sequence draws the three criminals back into normal space-time, materializing them within the fortress, where Superman awaits with carefully prepared speeches about the opportunities that their new world offers to those willing to embrace peaceful coexistence. General Zod's response to freedom carries all the authority that once commanded Kryptonian military forces across multiple star systems. His first act upon returning to physical existence is to kneel in formal recognition of Superman's superior strength and leadership, a gesture that appears to acknowledge both his rescue and his worthiness to lead other survivors. But the subtext of his submission speaks to strategic calculation rather than genuine gratitude or reformed ideology. Kal-El. Zod intones with the measured precision that characterizes Kryptonian formal address. Son of Jor-El, last survivor of the House of El, you have achieved under this yellow sun what our people could have accomplished across the galaxy. You have demonstrated that Kryptonian heritage grants us the power to reshape entire worlds according to our vision of proper order. The conversation that follows reveals that Zod's decades in the Phantom Zone have not prompted reconsideration of his fundamental beliefs about Kryptonian destiny, but rather reinforced his conviction that their superior capabilities obligate them to impose civilization upon lesser species. His analysis of Earth's social and political structures identifies inefficiencies and conflicts that could be eliminated through proper Kryptonian administration. His assessment of human potential concludes that the species shows promise but requires guidance from beings whose intellectual and physical development represents the natural next step in evolutionary progress. Look around you. Zod gestures toward holographic displays that show Earth's current conflicts: wars, poverty, environmental degradation, political corruption that prevents optimal resource allocation. This world suffers because its dominant species lacks the wisdom to govern itself effectively. We could end war in weeks, eliminate hunger in months, establish perfect justice in less than a year. We possess the power to give humanity the peace and prosperity that their own limitations prevent them from achieving. Superman's response reflects values learned during 18 years in Smallville, where the Kents taught him that freedom represents humanity's most precious possession, more valuable than safety, prosperity, or even survival if the cost involves surrender of the right to make their own choices. His experience as Earth's protector has shown him that humans possess remarkable capacity for growth, creativity, and moral development when given the opportunity to learn from their mistakes rather than having solutions imposed by superior force. They have the right to find their own way, Superman argues, though his certainty wavers as he contemplates the suffering that Zod's proposal could eliminate. Yes, they make mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes cost lives, but the growth that comes from overcoming challenges through their own efforts, that's what makes them remarkable. Take away their freedom to choose, and you destroy the very qualities that make them worth protecting. The philosophical debate that follows encompasses everything from governance theory to evolutionary biology, as Zod systematically dismantles Superman's arguments with logic that proves difficult to refute. Human history demonstrates consistent patterns of violence, oppression, and resource mismanagement that superior intelligence could easily correct. Democratic institutions produce suboptimal outcomes because they grant equal voice to citizens whose understanding of complex issues varies dramatically. Wars occur because emotional decision-making overrides rational analysis of mutual interests. But it's Zod's personal appeal that proves most challenging to Superman's convictions. Here is someone who understands the isolation of being Kryptonian on a world populated by beings whose capabilities pale in comparison to what yellow sun radiation grants their physiology. Someone who appreciates the weight of possessing power sufficient to reshape civilization while being constrained by moral principles that prevent its optimal use. Someone who offers the companionship of equals in place of the loneliness that comes from perpetual concealment of one's true nature. You waste your potential protecting beings who would destroy themselves without constant intervention. Zod observes, his analysis of Superman's heroic career revealing patterns that suggest futility rather than progress. How many times have you saved the same people from the same mistakes? How many criminals have you apprehended only to watch them escape and commit new crimes? How much energy have you expended treating symptoms while ignoring the fundamental problems that create them? The alliance that Zod proposes would transform Earth's entire social structure according to Kryptonian principles of optimal organization. Crime would become impossible through constant surveillance and immediate intervention. War would end through the elimination of national boundaries and the establishment of unified planetary governance. Poverty would disappear through perfect resource allocation, managed by intellects capable of processing variables that overwhelm human analytical capabilities. Superman's rejection of this vision reflects not logical analysis but moral intuition shaped by values that transcend efficiency or utilitarian calculation. His experience among humans has taught him that their greatest achievements emerge from struggle rather than perfection, that their capacity for growth depends on freedom to make wrong choices as well as right ones, that their essential dignity lies in their right to determine their own destiny, regardless of whether superior beings could manage their affairs more effectively. No, Superman says finally, the word carrying finality that surprises even him with its certainty. I won't help you conquer Earth, no matter how beneficial that conquest might be for humanity in the long term. They deserve the right to make their own mistakes and find their own solutions. Zod's response to this rejection reflects the patient calculation of someone who has spent decades planning for every contingency. His submission was never genuine, merely a tactical maneuver designed to assess Superman's capabilities and moral limitations before implementing alternative strategies. If Kal-El will not join their mission willingly, then he becomes an obstacle to be overcome rather than an asset to be recruited. The battle that follows transforms the Fortress of Solitude into an arena where Kryptonian capabilities are unleashed without restraint for the first time since their arrival on Earth. Zod, Ursa, and Non possess all of Superman's ability strength that could move continents, speed that approaches light velocity, invulnerability that renders conventional weapons useless, heat vision that could melt mountains. But they also possess military training that Superman lacks, tactical experience earned through campaigns across multiple worlds, and most importantly, a willingness to use lethal force that Superman's moral code prevents him from matching. The conflict spills beyond the fortress, as Zod recognizes that Superman's greatest weakness lies in his compulsive need to protect innocent life. By threatening populated areas, the general forces his opponent to divide his attention between offense and defense, creating opportunities that trained warriors can exploit against even superior opponents. The battle moves from the Arctic to Metropolis, where skyscrapers become projectiles and city blocks serve as battlegrounds for forces that dwarf anything Earth's military could resist. But it's the psychological warfare that proves most effective against Superman's resistance. Zod's attacks focus not on defeating him through superior strength, but on demonstrating that his protection of humanity ultimately proves futile. Every building destroyed in their conflict represents dozens of human casualties. Every moment spent defending civilians allows the three criminals to cause additional destruction elsewhere. The very heroism that defines Superman's character becomes a tactical disadvantage when facing enemies who view human life as expendable. You cannot save them all, Zod taunts as their battle levels entire city blocks. Every second you waste protecting these few condemns thousands of others to death. Submit to the inevitable. and we will end this destruction. Continue to resist, and their blood becomes your responsibility. The resolution arrives not through superior power but through strategic sacrifice that epitomizes Superman's fundamental values. Rather than continue a battle that threatens millions of innocent lives, he allows himself to be captured by accepting exposure to kryptonite radiation that Zod has somehow acquired. His surrender creates the opening that Earth's military forces need to deploy weapons specifically designed to exploit the same Kryptonian vulnerabilities that temporarily neutralize Superman's abilities. The final confrontation takes place in Smallville, where Zod's forces make their last stand among the wheat fields, where Superman learned to balance extraordinary power with ordinary human values. The symbolism is lost on no one. The philosophical conflict between conquest and service plays out against the landscape that shaped the man who chose protection over domination. The defeat of Zod's forces requires cooperation between Superman and human authorities whose technological limitations normally prevent them from contributing meaningfully to conflicts involving superhuman capabilities. But kryptonite weapons, deployed with precision that Superman's tactical guidance makes possible, prove capable of neutralizing Kryptonian physiology long enough for the Phantom Zone projector to reclaim its escaped prisoners. The decision to return them to interdimensional exile rather than seek alternative punishments reflects Superman's recognition that some individuals cannot be reformed or contained through conventional means. The Phantom Zone represents not cruel and unusual punishment, but acknowledgement that beings capable of destroying civilizations require isolation from the societies they threaten. Their crimes transcend any possibility of rehabilitation that normal justice systems could provide. But the cost of victory extends beyond property damage or temporary casualties. Superman's faith in the possibility of redemption for even the worst criminals suffers damage that will influence his approach to justice for years to come. His belief that Kryptonian heritage automatically implies moral superiority gives way to understanding that great power can serve evil as easily as good, depending on the values that guide its application. Most significantly, his confrontation with Zod establishes precedents for dealing with threats that transcend Earth's normal categories of criminal behavior. Some enemies cannot be reasoned with, reformed, or safely contained through methods that respect their civil rights or dignity. The protection of innocent life sometimes requires decisions that compromise idealistic principles in favor of pragmatic necessity. The Phantom Zone projector, when the crisis ends, returns to its place within the fortress, where it serves as both repository for dangerous criminals and reminder of the prices that advanced civilizations must sometimes pay to maintain their values. The three figures trapped within its dimensional pocket continue their eternal imprisonment, conscious but powerless, experiencing the passage of time while remaining forever separated from the universe they sought to reshape according to their vision of optimal order. Superman's vigil over the device reflects his ongoing responsibility for ensuring that the Zone's prisoners never again threaten innocent life, while simultaneously acknowledging that their punishment represents a form of justice that troubles his conscience even as he recognizes its necessity. The balance between mercy and protection, between redemption and public safety, becomes a theme that will define his heroic career as he encounters other enemies whose crimes exceed the boundaries of conventional justice. Kandor, Kryptonian legacy. The city that rises from Earth's polar wasteland defies every architectural principle that human engineering has developed over millennia of urban planning. Kandor's crystalline spires twist skyward according to mathematical equations that treat gravity as a suggestion rather than law, their surfaces refracting Arctic sunlight into rainbows that paint the surrounding ice fields in colors that have no names in any terrestrial language. This is urban design that emerged from 10,000 years of technological advancement, shaped by minds that learn to manipulate matter at the molecular level and bend space-time according to aesthetic preferences as much as functional requirements. The restoration process consumed 3 months of careful preparation as Superman worked with Earth's finest scientists to understand the principles that governed Brainiac's miniaturization technology. The expansion from Bottle City to full scale required energy calculations that taxed even his Kryptonian intelligence, while the environmental considerations involved creating a habitat that could support 100,000 refugees whose biological needs differed subtly but significantly from human norms. Most complex of all were the cultural preparation introducing Kandorian leaders to Earth's political and social structures, while helping them understand that their new home operated according to principles that bore little resemblance to Kryptonian civilization at its height. The first Kandorians to emerge from their restored city do so with the tentative steps of people who have spent decades living in artificial environments that simulated normal planetary conditions while concealing the truth about their circumstances. They are Superman's people in every sense that genetics and culture can define. Graceful beings, whose enhanced physiology responds to Earth's yellow sun by developing capabilities that rival his own. But they are also strangers whose memories of home encompass wonders that Earth's technology cannot replicate and social structures that humanity has never attempted to implement. Allura Zor-El, Superman's aunt and Kandor's senior surviving leader, emerges from the crystalline administrative complex that serves as the city's governmental center, with the dignified bearing of someone accustomed to making decisions that affect millions of lives. Her relationship to Superman creates immediate complexities that neither of them anticipated. She remembers Kal-El as the infant sent away during Krypton's final days, while he has grown into something that bridges Kryptonian heritage with Earth's values in ways that create fundamental philosophical differences. "You have done well, nephew," Allura observes as they survey Kandor's expansion across the Arctic landscape, noting the adaptations that her people are making to accommodate Earth's environmental conditions. "Your adoptive world has shaped you into something that honors both your birth heritage and your chosen home. But the question that faces us now is whether Kandorians and humans can coexist on a planet that has room for only one dominant civilization." The cultural challenges that emerge from Kandor's restoration encompass everything from basic resource allocation to fundamental questions about the relationship between advanced and primitive societies. Kandorians possess technologies that could solve most of Earth's pressing problems: energy systems that operate without environmental damage, medical treatments that could eliminate diseases that claim millions of lives annually, agricultural techniques that could end hunger within a single growing season. But the application of such knowledge requires decisions about whether advanced civilizations have obligations to assist less developed species, and whether such assistance ultimately helps or harms the recipient's natural development. Superman finds himself serving as cultural translator between peoples whose capabilities and perspectives differ so dramatically that meaningful communication requires constant mediation. Kandorians view Earth's social and political conflicts as evidence of humanity's need for guidance from beings whose intellectual development has progressed beyond such primitive concerns. Humans perceive Kandorian offers of assistance as potential threats to their autonomy and dignity, fearing that acceptance of alien aid might reduce them to permanent dependency on superior benefactors. The philosophical debates that emerge from these cultural exchanges force Superman to examine assumptions about his own role as Earth's protector that he has never questioned. His individual interventions in human crisis stopping, natural disasters, preventing crimes, rescuing people from immediate dangers represent exactly the kind of assistance that Kandorians propose to provide on a systematic scale. The difference lies only in scope and consistency, yet that difference seems to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of help and the preservation of dignity. "Why do you limit yourself to treating symptoms rather than addressing root causes?" Allura asks during one of their discussions about the proper relationship between advanced and primitive civilizations. "You save individual humans from immediate threats, but you do nothing to eliminate the social and economic factors that create those threats in the first place. If you truly wish to help them, should you not use your capabilities to establish optimal governance structures that would prevent suffering rather than merely responding to it after it occurs?" The question haunts Superman because he recognizes its logical validity, even as his moral intuition rebels against its implications. His experience among humans has taught him that their greatest achievements emerge from struggle rather than perfection, that their capacity for growth depends on freedom to make mistakes, as well as wise choices, that their essential dignity lies in their right to determine their own destiny, regardless of whether superior beings could manage their affairs more effectively. But the presence of an entire Kryptonian city on Earth's surface creates pressures that his individual heroism never generated. Human governments demand to know whether Kandor represents a peaceful refugee settlement or an invasion force whose superior capabilities pose existential threats to terrestrial civilization. Military leaders analyze Kryptonian technology with strategic implications that encompass both defensive possibilities and offensive capabilities that could render Earth's entire defense infrastructure obsolete. Religious communities debate whether Kandorian arrival fulfills ancient prophecies or represents challenges to theological beliefs about humanity's special relationship with divine creation. The tensions escalate when groups of younger Kandorians begin to explore Earth's societies with curiosity that reveals both wonder and unconscious condescension. Their enhanced abilities make them capable of traveling anywhere on the planet within hours, experiencing human cultures without the limitations that prevent most terrestrial tourism. But their observations of human civilization, filtered through Kryptonian perspectives on optimal social organization, often result in conclusions that insult rather than enlighten their hosts. Reports reach Superman of Kandorian visitors who offer unsolicited advice about improving human agricultural techniques, redesigning urban infrastructure according to principles that prioritize efficiency over beauty, and establishing governance systems that would eliminate democracy in favor of technocratic administration by those most qualified to make complex decisions. Their intentions are benevolent, but their approach reflects assumptions about the relationship between advanced and primitive civilizations that threaten to create permanent tensions between the two species. The crisis that tests both communities' commitment to peaceful coexistence emerges from unexpected quarters. A group of Kandorian scientists, working to adapt their medical technologies for human physiology, accidentally creates a plague that affects only terrestrial immune systems. The disease proves non-fatal to humans, but causes temporary neurological effects that impair judgment and emotional regulation. Within days, major cities experience surges in crime, domestic violence, and political extremism as infected populations struggle with chemical imbalances that amplify their worst impulses. Superman's response to the crisis demonstrates both the possibilities and limitations of cooperation between Kryptonian and human capabilities. Kandorian science provides understanding of the plague's mechanism and potential treatments, while Earth's medical infrastructure offers distribution networks that can reach affected populations faster than any Kryptonian technology could manage. But the collaboration requires trust between communities whose fundamental worldviews create suspicion about each other's motivations and methods. The cure, when it finally arrives, emerges from research that combines Kryptonian theoretical knowledge with human practical experience. Dr. Emil Hamilton's team at STAR Labs provides insights into human neurochemistry that Kandorian scientists lack, while Kryptonian researchers contribute analytical capabilities that exceed Earth's technological limitations. The synthesis produces treatments that address the plague's immediate effects while establishing precedents for future cooperation between the two civilizations. But the resolution of the medical crisis creates new challenges as both communities grapple with questions about responsibility, accountability, and the proper relationship between helpers and helped. Kandorians experience guilt about creating problems that their advanced knowledge should have prevented, while humans struggle with gratitude that feels dangerously close to dependency. The successful collaboration proves that cooperation is possible, but also reveals how easily misunderstandings can escalate into conflicts that threaten both species' welfare. The cultural evolution that follows encompasses years of careful negotiation, as Kandorians and humans develop frameworks for coexistence that acknowledge their differences while building on their shared values. Kandor establishes diplomatic relationships with Earth's major governments, offering technological assistance in areas where human societies request help, while respecting autonomy in matters where independence is preferred. The city becomes both refugee settlement and research center, where Kryptonian knowledge advances human understanding, while human perspectives challenge Kryptonian assumptions about optimal civilization. The emergence of hybrid communities represents the most hopeful development in interspecies relations. Young Kandorians, who choose to live among human societies while maintaining connections to their birth culture, create bridges between civilizations that pure scientific or diplomatic exchange cannot provide. Their children born on Earth but carrying Kryptonian genetic heritage represent something unprecedented in galactic history. True synthesis between species whose evolutionary paths diverged millions of years ago. But it's the mythology that emerges from Kandor's presence that proves most significant for Superman's ongoing development as Earth's protector. The stories that Kandorian elders share about Krypton's golden age provide context for understanding the civilization that produced both great wonders and ultimate destruction. Tales of heroes whose names have been honored for millennia demonstrate that Superman's commitment to service represents continuation of traditions that predate Earth's entire recorded history. Most importantly, Kandorian legends speak of Nightwing and Flamebird mythological figures whose adventures in the ancient past establish templates for heroism that transcend individual planets or species. According to these stories, greatness lies not in the exercise of power, but in the choice to use power in service of values that honor both strength and compassion. The heroes of legend succeeded not because they were stronger than their enemies, but because they remained true to principles that guided their actions even when victory seemed impossible. Superman's study of these myths reveals that his own heroic career follows patterns established long before Krypton's destruction, suggesting that some aspects of heroism represent universal constants that emerge wherever sentient beings develop sufficient power to affect their environment. The symbol he wears, the Kryptonian crest that means hope, appears in various forms throughout Kandorian legends, always associated with figures who chose protection over conquest, service over domination, inspiration over intimidation. The integration of Kandorian culture with Earth's societies creates ripple effects that extend far beyond immediate diplomatic or technological concerns. Human arts and sciences benefit from exposure to Kryptonian perspectives that encompass thousands of years of development, while Kandorian creativity flourishes when challenged by human approaches to problems that their advanced civilization had forgotten how to see. The synthesis produces innovations in fields ranging from architecture to philosophy, creating new possibilities that neither species could have achieved independently. But perhaps most significantly, Kandor's presence transforms Superman's understanding of his own identity and mission. No longer the last of his kind, he becomes instead the bridge between civilizations whose cooperation could benefit both species while respecting the autonomy that each requires to maintain its essential character. His role evolves from individual hero to cultural ambassador, demonstrating through his example that great power need not threaten lesser capabilities, and that advanced civilizations can assist primitive ones without compromising the dignity that makes assistance valuable. The Nightwing and Flamebird mythology that Kandorian culture preserves provides Superman with something he has sought throughout his heroic career: proof that his commitment to service represents continuation of traditions that honor both his Kryptonian heritage and his Earth upbringing. The heroes of legend succeeded not by rejecting their origins in favor of their adopted homes, but by finding ways to honor both while serving values that transcend any single world or species. The age of individual heroism continues, as it must while threats emerge that require immediate response from those capable of providing it. But the age of collaborative civilization has begun, bringing with it recognition that humanity's greatest challenges may require cooperation between species whose capabilities complement each other in ways that honor both advancement and dignity, both strength and wisdom, both tradition and innovation. Silver Age wonders, infinite Earths. The reality that Superman inhabits expands beyond the boundaries of single planets or solar systems as encounters with beings and phenomena that challenge every assumption about the nature of existence itself begin to proliferate with increasing frequency. The universe reveals itself to be far stranger and more wonderful than even Kryptonian science ever imagined, filled with entities whose capabilities operate according to principles that treat the fundamental laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute constraints. The first hint of these broader possibilities arrives in the form of a small white dog whose presence in Earth's atmosphere defies every biological principle that governs normal animal life. Krypto appears during Superman's investigation of cosmic radiation anomalies near Jupiter's orbit, materializing from space in a crystalline capsule that bears unmistakable signs of Kryptonian origin. The dog's enhanced capability strength that rivals Superman's own, the ability to fly without visible means of propulsion, heat vision that could melt asteroids suggest exposure to Earth's yellow sun radiation, combined with genetic modifications that Kryptonian science developed for unknown purposes. But it's Krypto's immediate recognition of Superman that provides the most compelling evidence of their connection. The dog responds to Kryptonian vocal commands that Superman barely remembers learning, demonstrates affection that speaks to bonds formed before conscious memory could record them, and exhibits protective instincts toward Earth that suggest training or programming designed to support Superman's heroic mission. Investigation of the capsule's memory banks reveals fragmentary records of Jor-El's experiments with biological enhancement, suggesting that Krypto served as a test subject for technologies that would later be incorporated into the rocket that carried baby Kal-El to safety. The partnership that develops between Superman and his canine companion adds dimensions to heroism that purely human relationships cannot provide. Krypto's enhanced senses complement Superman's own capabilities, while his animal instincts often detect threats that rational analysis might overlook. More importantly, the dog's presence provides emotional support that helps Superman maintain connection to simple joys and unconditional loyalty in a world where his responsibilities often require difficult choices that alienate even his closest friends. Their adventures together encompass threats that range from interdimensional invaders to time-traveling criminals, but it's their exploration of parallel realities that proves most significant for understanding the true scope of existence. The discovery that multiple versions of Earth exist in adjacent dimensions, each one developing according to slight variations in historical events or physical laws, fundamentally alters Superman's comprehension of his place in the cosmic order. The first glimpse of these parallel worlds comes during an investigation of temporal anomalies that appear to be affecting gravity throughout the solar system. Superman's pursuit of the energy source responsible for these disturbances leads him through a dimensional barrier that separates his reality from one of countless alternatives. The Earth he discovers on the other side shares many characteristics with his own world, but the differences prove both fascinating and troubling. Earth 2 houses a Superman whose career began decades earlier, whose costume displays subtle variations in design and color, whose approach to heroism reflects the values and assumptions of a different historical period. This older Superman has established a heroic tradition that inspired an entire generation of champions whose adventures shaped their world's development in ways that Superman's own reality has yet to experience. But their Earth also bears scars from conflicts that his world has avoided, cities rebuilt after devastating attacks, populations that have learned to live with knowledge that extraordinary threats represent constant rather than occasional dangers. The meeting between the two Supermen creates paradoxes that challenge every assumption about identity and uniqueness. They are simultaneously the same person and completely different individuals, sharing genetic heritage and moral principles while reflecting the influences of societies that developed according to alternative historical trajectories. Their comparison of experiences reveals that heroism adapts to the specific needs and challenges of each reality, suggesting that no single approach to protecting innocent life represents the optimal solution for all circumstances. But it's the discovery of Bizarro World that truly tests Superman's understanding of identity and perfection. This crystalline planet orbits a blue sun in a distant star system, populated by imperfect duplicates of Earth's heroes and villains, whose backwards logic creates a society that operates according to principles that invert normal cause and effect relationships. Bizarro Superman, designated Bizarro, one by his planet's unusual numbering system, represents everything that Superman is not: incompetent rather than capable, destructive rather than protective, motivated by confusion rather than clarity. Yet beneath the surface comedy of Bizarro World's backward civilization lies genuine tragedy. These imperfect duplicates possess the memories and emotional attachments of their originals, but lack the capabilities necessary to fulfill their deepest aspirations. Bizarro Superman wants desperately to help people, but his flawed powers and reversed logic ensure that his interventions cause more harm than good. His love for Bizarro Lois Lane mirrors Superman's feelings for his own Lois, but their relationship unfolds according to backwards customs that transform romance into farce. Superman's visits to Bizarro World force him to confront questions about the nature of perfection and the value of good intentions when separated from competent execution. The Bizarro population views their backwards logic as normal and proper, creating a society where success is measured by failure and virtue is defined by incompetence. Yet they experience genuine emotions, love, fear, hope, despair that prove their essential humanity despite their cognitive limitations. The temporal adventures that characterize this period of Superman's career reveal that time itself operates according to principles far more complex than linear progression from past to future. His encounters with the legion of superheroes, young champions from the 31st century, whose organization was inspired by stories of his heroic example, demonstrate that his influence extends across millennia to inspire heroes whose capabilities far exceed his own. But these time travel experiences also reveal the fragility of historical continuity and the potential consequences of altering past events. Superman's attempts to prevent tragedies in Earth's history, stopping natural disasters, preventing wars, saving lives that were lost in his original timeline, create ripple effects that threaten to unravel the very reality that produced his heroic career. The lesson he learns through painful experience is that some suffering cannot be prevented without destroying the growth and development that emerges from overcoming challenges through natural progression. The multiverse that gradually reveals itself to Superman's expanding awareness encompasses infinite variations on familiar themes. Worlds where Krypton never exploded, where baby Kal-El was found by different families, where his powers developed according to alternative parameters. Realities where other heroes took his place as Earth's primary protector, where villains achieved victory over forces of good, where humanity developed along paths that produced very different relationships between normal and extraordinary individuals. Each exploration of these alternative realities provides new perspectives on the choices that shaped Superman's own development and the societies that his heroism helps to protect. The comparison reveals that his reality represents neither the best nor worst of all possible worlds, but one possibility among infinite alternatives that continues to evolve according to decisions made by countless individuals whose actions collectively determine the future's ultimate direction. The beings that inhabit the spaces between realities prove to be among the most challenging opponents that Superman ever encounters. Mr. MXYZPTLK, the reality-manipulating entity from the fifth dimension, possesses capabilities that treat physical laws as amusing constraints to be violated for entertainment purposes. His interventions in Superman's reality transform Metropolis into playgrounds where impossible becomes routine and logic surrenders to whim. But MXYZPTL's true power lies not in his ability to reshape matter and energy, but in his capacity to alter the fundamental rules that govern cause and effect relationships. During their encounters, Superman must rely not on strength or speed, but on cleverness and moral certainty to convince a being who views existence as an elaborate game that some outcomes are inherently more valuable than others. The challenges that MXYZPTLK presents force Superman to defend not just physical reality, but the philosophical principles that make reality worth preserving. Their contests become battles between chaos and order, between entertainment and meaning, between power exercised for its own sake and power directed toward protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The revelations that emerge from these multiversal explorations establish foundations for understanding threats that transcend individual planets or solar systems. The cosmic forces that shape reality across infinite dimensions operate according to patterns that suggest purpose and direction beneath apparent randomness. Heroes and villains, creation and destruction, hope and despair represent essential elements in struggles that encompass scales beyond any single being's comprehension. But perhaps most importantly, Superman's exposure to infinite alternatives confirms that his own choices matter in ways that extend far beyond their immediate consequences. Each decision to help rather than harm, to inspire rather than intimidate, to protect rather than conquer, creates ripples that strengthen the forces of good throughout the multiverse. His example resonates across dimensions to inspire heroes whose realities bear little resemblance to his own, yet whose commitment to service reflects values that transcend the boundaries of time and space. The universe reveals itself to be far more wondrous and terrifying than any single perspective could encompass, filled with possibilities that range from transcendent beauty to unthinkable horror. But within this vast tapestry of infinite potential, certain constants emerge that provide hope and guidance for those who choose to serve rather than dominate. Love proves stronger than hate, truth more enduring than deception, sacrifice more meaningful than conquest, regardless of which reality serves as the stage for their eternal conflict. The age of planetary heroism continues, as it must while individual worlds face threats that require immediate response from those capable of providing protection. But the age of multiversal awareness has begun, bringing recognition that the greatest heroes serve purposes that extend beyond their home realities to encompass the fundamental struggle between forces that create and forces that destroy throughout all existence. Crisis on Infinite Earths. The tremors begin as subtle disruptions in the fabric of reality itself, gravitational anomalies that cause time to flow backward for microseconds, electromagnetic disturbances that make radio telescopes detect signals from events that have not yet occurred, quantum fluctuations that suggest the fundamental forces governing existence are becoming increasingly unstable. At first, these phenomena appear isolated and manageable, the kind of cosmic background radiation that advanced civilizations learn to monitor and compensate for during their expansion into interstellar space. But as Superman extends his sensory awareness beyond Earth's atmosphere to encompass nearby star systems, he detects patterns in the chaos that speak to intelligence rather than random force. Something vast and purposeful moves through the space between dimensions, consuming realities with methodical precision that suggests appetite rather than mere destruction. The antimatter wave that emerges from the cosmic void represents entropy given form and direction, a force that doesn't simply destroy matter but erases it from existence so completely that even memories of its passing fade from consciousness of survivors. The first casualties are realities so removed from Superman's own dimension that their destruction registers only as background static in the cosmic radiation that bathes the multiverse in constant low-level energy. But as the antimatter wave gains momentum and begins consuming dimensions closer to his own reality, the effects become impossible to ignore. Stars vanish from constellations that have remained constant for millions of years. Gravitational fields that once anchored entire galactic clusters simply cease to exist, leaving behind voids that seem to actively resist the formation of new matter. The Monitor, an ancient cosmic entity whose existence spans the birth and death of universes, materializes in Superman's reality with warnings that transform local concerns into multiversal emergency. His appearance a figure of living energy contained within crystalline armor that exists in more dimensions than human perception, can process speaks to technologies and perspectives that dwarf even Kryptonian scientific achievement. But it's his message that truly conveys the magnitude of the threat approaching all existence. The Anti-Monitor seeks to collapse the multiverse into a single reality under his control. The Monitor explains, his communication bypassing language entirely to implant concepts directly into Superman's consciousness. Every alternative Earth, every parallel dimension, every possible variation of Histral will be consumed unless the forces of creation unite against entropy made manifest. The alliance that forms in response to this crisis encompasses heroes from across the dimensional spectrum, bringing together champions whose realities have developed according to radically different historical trajectories. Earth-2's aged Superman, whose decades of experience provide wisdom that complements his younger counterpart's raw power. The Flash, whose mastery of speed-force mechanics allows him to perceive and navigate the temporal distortions that antimatter creates. Wonder Woman, whose divine heritage grants her insights into cosmic forces that pure science cannot analyze. But it's the presence of Earth-2's Supergirl Kara Zor-El, who survived Krypton's destruction through circumstances different from her cousin's journey, that provides Superman with his most complex emotional challenge during the crisis. Here is family he never knew existed, sharing his genetic heritage but shaped by experiences that produced a hero whose approach to protecting innocent life reflects subtle but significant differences in philosophy and method. Kara's strength rivals Superman's own, enhanced by years of combat experience against threats that her Earth faced during its longer history of superhuman conflict. Her heat vision operates at frequencies that can disrupt antimatter itself, while her speed approaches levels that allow limited travel between dimensions. Most importantly, her willingness to accept necessary sacrifices in service of larger victories provides tactical options that Superman's moral constraints prevent him from considering. You still believe that every life can be saved, Kara observes during their first joint mission against Anti-Monitor's shadow demons. Your Earth has been fortunate enough to allow such idealism. Mine taught me that sometimes heroes must choose which lives to preserve when saving everyone becomes impossible. The philosophical debate that her presence sparks forces Superman to examine assumptions about heroism that his relatively peaceful reality has never challenged. Earth, too, has endured decades of conflicts that pushed its champions to their limits and beyond, creating a generation of heroes whose methods reflect hard-won wisdom about the prices that protecting civilization sometimes demands. Their willingness to accept casualties in service of ultimate victory contrasts sharply with Superman's compulsive need to find solutions that preserve every innocent life. The crisis escalates as the Anti-Monitor's forces begin systematic assault on the remaining realities, targeting key individuals whose removal will destabilize entire dimensions. Superman's reality comes under direct attack when shadow demons materialize in Metropolis, with specific orders to eliminate him before he can rally effective resistance. The battle that follows transforms the city into a war zone where normal physics surrender to forces that operate according to antimatter principles. Each shadow demon that Superman destroys creates voids in local space-time that threaten to expand until they consume the surrounding matter. His heat vision, normally capable of precision that allows surgical application of force, becomes a liability when antimatter contamination turns every energy discharge into potential reality-ending explosion. The very powers that make him Earth's greatest protector become sources of additional danger when facing enemies whose existence violates the fundamental laws that govern normal matter. The turning point arrives when the Anti-Monitor targets the dimensional barriers that separate remaining realities, seeking to collapse them into a single universe where his antimatter essence can exert complete control. The process requires enormous energy expenditure that creates temporary vulnerabilities in his otherwise impregnable defenses. But exploiting those weaknesses demands sacrifices that test every hero's commitment to principles that define their character. Supergirl's assault on the Anti-Monitor's fortress in the antimatter dimension represents heroism elevated to cosmic scale. Her penetration of defenses that have resisted the combined efforts of multiversal champions requires speed that approaches the theoretical limits of what matter can achieve while remaining coherent. Her battle with the Anti-Monitor himself encompasses forces that reshape local reality, according to the whims of beings whose power sources dwarf the energy output of entire galaxies. But it's her final act, the deliberate overload of her own biomatrix to create an explosion that damages the Anti-Monitor's essential structure, that epitomizes the kind of sacrifice that ultimate victory sometimes requires. The blast that claims her life also cripples humanity's greatest enemy, creating the opening that allows other heroes to complete the campaign against antimatter tyranny. Superman's presence at Kara's death transforms cosmic conflict into intensely personal tragedy. His cousin's final words expressing hope that his reality will prove worthy of the prices paid to preserve it challenge him to find meaning in losses that defy every instinct toward protection and preservation that defines his heroic identity. The universe demands sacrifices that heroism cannot prevent, only honor through continued commitment to the values that make such sacrifices meaningful. The resolution of the crisis involves not the Anti-Monitor's destruction, but his transformation into something that serves creation rather than entropy. The positive matter energy released by Supergirl's sacrifice, combined with the dimensional forces that heroes from across the multiverse channel through their coordinated efforts, converts antimatter essence into a new cosmic force that will guard against future threats to reality's stability. But victory's price extends beyond individual casualties to encompass fundamental changes in the nature of existence itself. The multiversal collapse that the Anti-Monitor initiated cannot be completely reversed. Infinite realities contract into a single unified dimension, where alternative histories become memories rather than accessible destinations. The Earth that emerges from this cosmic restructuring incorporates elements from multiple realities, creating a world where heroes from different dimensions must learn to coexist in a single shared timeline. Superman's own history undergoes subtle but significant modifications as reality adjusts to accommodate heroes whose backgrounds were shaped by different historical developments. Events that he remembers occurring one-way blend with alternative versions of the same incidents, creating composite memories that encompass experiences from multiple dimensional variants. The process proves disorienting but ultimately enriching, as expanded perspective provides insights into possibilities that single timeline existence could never offer. The Earth 2 Superman's fate during the crisis provides both triumph and tragedy in equal measure. His reunion, with his dimension's Lois Lane in a pocket paradise beyond normal spacetime, offers reward for decades of service that demanded every sacrifice, except the ultimate one. Their departure from active heroism marks the end of an era, while providing example of what awaits those who serve faithfully through conflicts that span the breadth of existence. The new reality that emerges from crisis resolution establishes foundations for heroism that encompasses cosmic as well as planetary responsibility. The Justice League that forms in the aftermath includes champions whose capabilities span the full spectrum of power levels, from street-level crime fighters to cosmic entities whose influence extends across galactic distances. Their cooperation demonstrates that effective protection of innocent life requires coordination between heroes whose specializations complement each other while serving shared values. But perhaps most importantly, the crisis establishes precedents for dealing with threats that transcend normal categories of good and evil. Some forces represent entropy so fundamental that their defeat requires transformation rather than destruction. Some victories demand prices that challenge every assumption about acceptable costs for protecting civilization. Some truths prove too vast for individual comprehension, requiring collective wisdom that emerges only through cooperation between beings whose perspectives encompass different aspects of ultimate reality. Superman's role in the post-crisis universe evolves to encompass responsibilities that extend beyond Earth's atmosphere, to include monitoring of cosmic forces that could threaten reality's stability. His experience during the multiversal conflict provides insights into the nature of existence that few beings have ever possessed, while his commitment to serving rather than dominating ensures that such knowledge will be used to protect rather than control. The symbol he wears, the Kryptonian crest, that means hope, takes on new significance in a reality that has witnessed the near destruction of everything that exists. Hope proves to be not naive optimism but rational response to evidence that creation ultimately proves stronger than entropy, that cooperation achieves more than competition, that sacrifice for others creates meaning that transcends individual mortality. The age of multiversal heroism concludes with reality's consolidation into a single timeline, but the lessons learned during Infinite Crisis continue to guide champions whose responsibility now encompasses protecting not just their homeworld, but the fundamental forces that make existence possible. The heroes who emerge from cosmic conflict carry wisdom earned through exposure to ultimate stakes, understanding that their choices influence not just immediate outcomes but the essential nature of reality itself. Post-Crisis Reforging, 1986 Man of Steel. The universe remakes itself with surgical precision, reality's fundamental structure reorganizing according to principles that prioritize coherence over complexity. The infinite alternatives that once characterized multiversal existence compress into a single timeline where contradictions resolve through historical revision that favors simplicity over the baroque complications that parallel dimensions once provided. In this streamlined cosmos, heroes' origins become cleaner, their motivations more direct, their relationships with the societies they protect less encumbered by the metaphysical weight of infinite possibility. Superman awakens into this reforged reality with memories that encompass both his previous existence and the new history that cosmic forces have written to replace it. The Krypton that destroyed itself in this timeline shares essential characteristics with the world of his birth's scientific advancement that achieved wonders before succumbing to hubris, parents who chose to save their infant son rather than themselves, a rocket that carried the last survivor across space to a world where his heritage would grant abilities beyond normal mortal ken. But the details have shifted in ways that reflect reality's preference for streamlined narrative over cosmic complexity. Krypton's destruction occurred through internal geological collapse rather than external attack, eliminating the brainiac connection that once complicated Superman's relationship with his birthworld's legacy. The space journey that brought baby Kal-El to Earth lasted months rather than years, allowing the rocket's programming to expose him to educational materials that provided basic knowledge of his heritage without the overwhelming cultural download that previous timelines required. Most significantly, the Superboy career that once bridged childhood innocence with adult responsibility simply never occurred. Clark Kent's development from powered infant to adult hero followed a path that emphasized gradual discovery of abilities rather than public display of supernatural capabilities. His teenage years in Smallville remained remarkably normal by the standards that apply to individuals destined for cosmic significance: high school athletics, part-time jobs, romantic relationships that provided emotional education without supernatural complications. The absence of early heroic adventures eliminates much of the mythology that once surrounded Superman's development, replacing cosmic destiny with more human-scaled choices about how to use extraordinary gifts in service of ordinary people. His decision to become Earth's protector emerges not from childhood dreams of superheroic glory, but from adult recognition that his capabilities create obligations that cannot be ignored without moral failure. This streamlined origin story reflects the universe's apparent decision that heroism works best when rooted in relatable human experience rather than mythological complexity. Superman's greatness derives not from fulfilling ancient prophecies or cosmic destinies, but from choosing to serve others despite possessing power sufficient to dominate or rule. His moral development occurs through normal socialization processes rather than guidance from artificial intelligences or time-traveling mentors. The fortress of solitude that serves as his sanctuary in this new reality operates with technology that feels less alien and more comprehensible, though no less advanced than its previous incarnation. The crystalline architecture still reflects Kryptonian aesthetics, but the knowledge stored within its memory banks emphasizes practical information rather than philosophical treatises. Jor-El's recorded messages provide guidance about Superman's heritage and capabilities, without overwhelming him with cultural expectations that might compromise his integration into human society. The costume that emerges from this streamlined continuity carries symbolic weight that feels more earned than inherited. Martha Kent's involvement in its creation transforms the garment from alien artifact into expression of maternal love and pride. The S emblem retains its Kryptonian significance as symbol of hope, but its primary meaning derives from the values that Superman demonstrates through his actions rather than the heraldic traditions of a dead world. Lex Luthor's role as Superman's primary antagonist gains new dimensions in this reality, where corporate power represents the most immediate threat to social justice. LexCorp's influence extends throughout Metropolis in ways that make Luthor's corruption a systemic problem, requiring systematic response rather than simple crime fighting. His psychological profile emphasizes narcissistic brilliance rather than tragic backstory, creating an enemy whose evil emerges from character flaws rather than circumstances beyond his control. The dynamic between them reflects contemporary concerns about the relationship between exceptional individuals and democratic institutions. Luthor represents the corruption that wealth and intelligence can create when directed towards self-aggrandizement rather than public service. Superman embodies the possibility that extraordinary capabilities can serve rather than subvert the common good, providing example rather than replacement for human institutions. Lois Lane's character develops along lines that emphasize professional competence and personal strength rather than requiring rescue from superhuman threats. Her relationship with Superman emerges from genuine attraction to his character rather than gratitude for protection from elaborate death traps. Their romance unfolds according to more realistic timelines that acknowledge the complexity of maintaining intimate relationships while juggling secret identities and cosmic responsibilities. The supporting cast that surrounds Superman in this reforged reality feels more grounded in recognizable social and professional contexts. Harry White's Daily Planet operates according to principles that journalism students would recognize, focusing on investigative reporting that serves public interest rather than sensational coverage of superhuman conflicts. Jimmy Olsen develops into a capable photographer whose loyalty to Superman stems from professional respect rather than childhood hero worship. The threats that Superman faces in this streamlined universe emphasize human-scale problems that extraordinary abilities can address without requiring cosmic-level solutions. Corporate corruption, organized crime, environmental destruction, political oppression. These challenges demand moral courage and strategic thinking, as much as superhuman strength or speed. Victory requires not just defeating villains, but inspiring ordinary people to resist the forces that create villainy in the first place. The absence of complex multiversal mythology allows Superman's stories to focus on character development and social commentary, rather than continuity management and cosmological exposition. His struggles with maintaining secret identity feel more urgent when they're not overshadowed by interdimensional crises. His relationships with family and friends gain emotional weight when they're not constantly interrupted by time travel adventures or reality-warping enemies. This emphasis on human-scaled storytelling reflects the universe's apparent recognition that heroism resonates most powerfully when it addresses problems that audiences can recognize from their own experience. Superman's greatest victories occur not when he prevents cosmic catastrophes, but when he demonstrates that exceptional individuals can choose service over self-interest, that power can be used to protect rather than dominate, that hope represents rational response to evidence rather than naive optimism. The psychology that emerges from this streamlined approach reveals Superman as someone whose greatest strength lies not in his Kryptonian abilities, but in his human upbringing. The values that guide his heroic career reflect lessons learned from Jonathan and Martha Kent rather than genetic programming or ancient traditions. His commitment to protecting innocent life stems from moral education rather than biological imperative. But the simplification also creates new complexities, as Superman navigates the relationship between his public heroic persona and his private Clark Kent identity. Without the cosmic destiny narrative that once justified his dual existence, maintaining the masquerade requires more careful attention to psychological and social details. The mild-mannered reporter must feel genuinely different from the confident hero in ways that convince people who interact with both identities on a regular basis. The Daily Planet becomes more than workplace. It serves as Clark's primary connection to human concerns that might otherwise become abstract to someone whose capabilities set him apart from normal social constraints. His journalism career provides insight into problems that superhuman intervention cannot address, while his relationships with colleagues ensure that he remains grounded in communities whose welfare he's dedicated to protecting. The Reforged Universe's approach to Superman's mythology emphasizes themes that resonate with contemporary social concerns rather than elaborate fantasy elements that distance him from audience experience. Immigration, assimilation, the proper use of power, the relationship between exceptional individuals and democratic society. These issues speak to readers whose own lives involve navigating complex social structures while maintaining personal integrity. The streamlined continuity eliminates much of the cosmic scope that once characterized Superman's adventures, but it gains emotional intimacy that makes his choices feel more meaningful. When everything is at stake, individual decisions carry less weight than when only specific communities or relationships hang in the balance. The universe's decision to emphasize human drama over cosmic spectacle reflects understanding that heroism ultimately derives from character rather than capability. The age of cosmic complexity concludes with reality's reorganization into forms that prioritize narrative coherence over mythological scope. But the age of character-driven heroism begins with Superman's emergence as someone whose greatness lies not in fulfilling destiny, but in choosing to serve despite possessing power sufficient to dominate. His symbol continues to represent hope, but hope grounded in human values rather than alien heritage, earned through moral choice rather than inherited through genetic legacy. Lois, Clark, the human anchor. The LexCorp Tower's 42nd floor gleams with the kind of corporate opulence that transforms wealth into architectural statement, every surface polished to reflect the power that Lex Luthor has accumulated through decades of strategic brilliance and ruthless ambition. Tonight's charity gala ostensibly benefits Metropolis Children's Hospitals, but the real purpose involves displaying influence that extends far beyond simple philanthropy. Politicians whose campaigns depend on LexCorp funding mingle with scientists whose research receives corporate grants, while journalists whose publications rely on advertising revenue maintain carefully neutral expressions while documenting the evening's proceedings. Lois Lane moves through this gathering with the predatory grace of someone who recognizes that every conversation represents potential intelligence about corruption that official investigations have failed to uncover. Her evening gown, elegant enough to satisfy the event's dress code while practical enough to conceal the recording equipment that will capture admissions no public statement would ever include, transforms her into perfectly camouflaged operative in enemy territory. She has spent months cultivating sources within LexCorp's hierarchy, earning trust that allows access to information that could topple Metropolis's most powerful corporate empire. Clark Kent's presence at the gala reflects the Daily Planet's commitment to covering major civic events, though his real motivation involves protecting Lois from dangers that her investigative work has attracted. His enhanced hearing monitors conversations throughout the ballroom, detecting threats that normal human senses would miss while maintaining the mild-mannered reporter facade that conceals his true capabilities. The formal wear that transforms him from rural Kansas transplant into convincing member of Metropolis's professional class feels like costume more elaborate than his Superman uniform. The assignment that brings them together as partners rather than colleagues emerges from Perry White's recognition that their complementary skills could penetrate LexCorp's defenses more effectively than either reporter working alone. Lois's investigative instincts combine with Clark's ability to access sources and locations that conventional journalism cannot reach, creating opportunities for stories that could expose corruption operating at the highest levels of corporate and political power. But it's their personal chemistry that transforms professional collaboration into something approaching courtship conducted through shared dedication to truth and justice. Clark's genuine admiration for Lois's courage and competence speaks to values that transcend romantic attraction, while her gradual recognition of depth beneath his apparently ordinary exterior suggests possibilities that neither anticipated when their partnership began. "You're not what you appear to be," Lois observes during a quiet moment between interviews with gala attendees whose carefully rehearsed responses reveal more through omission than inclusion. "There's something about you that doesn't quite fit the farm boy persona. You notice things that other people miss. You ask questions that suggest knowledge you shouldn't possess. And you move through dangerous situations with confidence that contradicts your supposed inexperience." Clark's response requires careful navigation between honesty and necessary deception, acknowledging her perceptiveness while protecting secrets that revelation would endanger. "Maybe I'm just more observant than people expect. Growing up in a small town teaches you to pay attention to details that city people take for granted. And working alongside someone as talented as you has taught me to ask better questions and look for stories that others might overlook." The sabotage that interrupts their evening occurs with theatrical precision that speaks to Lex Luthor's flair for dramatic gestures. Explosions rock the tower's infrastructure in patterns designed to create maximum chaos, while targeting specific individuals whose investigations have threatened corporate interests. The attack appears random to outside observers, but analysis of the destruction reveals surgical strikes against evidence, storage areas, and communication systems that could expose decades of accumulated corruption. As panic spreads through the ballroom and emergency systems struggle to manage cascading failures throughout the building, Clark faces the familiar challenge of protecting innocent life while maintaining his civilian identity. His enhanced vision reveals structural damage that threatens immediate collapse, while his hearing detects the cries of people trapped in elevators and stairwells that conventional rescue efforts cannot reach quickly enough to prevent casualties. The transformation from Clark Kent to Superman occurs in seconds that stretch toward eternity, as he calculates the precise actions necessary to save everyone while ensuring that no witnesses can connect his disappearance with the hero's arrival. The supply closet that provides temporary concealment becomes staging area for emergence into the most complex rescue operation of his heroic career. Superman's intervention in the LexCorp Tower crisis demonstrates capabilities that have evolved far beyond the relatively simple strength and speed that characterized his early adventures. His heat vision operates with surgical precision that allows him to weld structural supports while avoiding electrical systems that could cause additional explosions. His breath creates pressure differentials that clear smoke from stairwells without dispersing toxic fumes into populated areas. Most importantly, his speed allows him to be present in multiple locations simultaneously, creating the illusion of instant response to every emergency throughout the building. But it's his protection of Lois that requires the most delicate balance between heroism and personal investment. She has positioned herself in the tower's data center, gathering evidence about LexCorp's illegal activities even as the building collapses around her. Superman's rescue involves not just physical extraction but preservation of the intelligence she has risked her life to obtain evidence that could expose corruption extending throughout Metropolis's power structure. The conversation that occurs during their brief flight to safety establishes emotional foundations that will define their relationship for years to come. Lois's gratitude for rescue combines with professional excitement about the story she has uncovered, while Superman's relief at her survival transcends the satisfaction that normally accompanies successful heroic intervention. "You're remarkable," Superman tells her as they touch down on the Daily Planet's roof, her evidence safely preserved and her person unharmed despite exposure to dangers that would have killed anyone less resourceful. "Your courage in pursuing truth despite personal risk, that's the kind of heroism that inspires others to be better than they thought possible." Lois's response reveals insight that penetrates beyond Superman's public persona to recognize character that exists independent of superhuman capabilities. "You're not so bad yourself, but I have the feeling that saving people comes naturally to you, like you were born to protect others and couldn't imagine doing anything else with your abilities." The investigation that follows the tower incident creates opportunities for Clark and Lois to work together with increasing intimacy as their professional partnership evolves into friendship that approaches romantic possibility. Their pursuit of LexCorp corruption requires late nights in the Daily Planet newsroom, shared meals in Metropolis restaurants where they discuss evidence and strategy, and gradual revelation of personal histories that help each understand the experiences that shape the other's worldview. Clark's stories about growing up in Smallville provide glimpses of values and perspectives that urban sophistication sometimes loses, while Lois's accounts of her father's military career and her own early experiences in journalism reveal determination that refuses to accept limitations others might consider reasonable. Their differences complement rather than conflict, creating synthesis that makes both more effective at pursuing truth and justice. The romantic tension that develops between them faces complications that secret identity creates but cannot entirely suppress. Clark's inability to share the most fundamental truth about himself creates barriers that intimacy requires him to navigate without dishonesty that would violate the trust their relationship demands. His disappearances during Superman emergencies require explanations that feel genuine, while concealing realities that revelation would endanger. But it's Lois's growing suspicion about connections between Clark's absences and Superman's appearances that creates the most complex challenges to their developing relationship. Her investigative instincts, honed through years of pursuing stories that others consider impossible, begin to detect patterns that suggest links between the mild-mannered reporter and Metropolis's greatest hero. The breakthrough arrives during another crisis, where Clark's protective instincts override the caution that maintaining his secret identity requires. When Lois faces immediate mortal danger during an investigation of organized crime's connections to corporate corruption, Superman's response reveals knowledge of her location and circumstances that no independent hero should possess. The revelation scene unfolds on the Daily Planet's roof under starlight that transforms Metropolis's skyline into backdrop for the most important conversation of either character's life. Clark's decision to reveal his dual identity reflects trust that transcends strategic calculation, while Lois's response demonstrates emotional maturity that encompasses both shock and understanding. "How long have you known?" Clark asks, his voice carrying vulnerability that the Superman persona never displays in public. Lois's smile encompasses months of accumulated evidence that her investigative training prevented her from ignoring, despite emotional investment that made the truth difficult to accept. "Part of me suspected almost from the beginning. You're a terrible actor when it comes to pretending to be ordinary. But I kept talking myself out of believing something so incredible until the evidence became overwhelming." The conversation that follows establishes new foundations for their relationship, based on complete honesty rather than carefully managed revelation. Clark's explanation of his Kryptonian heritage and the responsibilities that his abilities create provides context that helps Lois understand the pressures that shape his every decision. Her acceptance of burdens that secret knowledge will impose demonstrates commitment that transcends romantic attraction to encompass partnership in service of values they both consider sacred. Their engagement, when it finally occurs, represents not just personal milestone, but symbolic union between ordinary humanity and extraordinary capability in service of shared ideals. The ring that Clark places on Lois's finger was crafted from crystalline material that survived Krypton's destruction, symbolizing bonds that transcend the limitations of single worlds or species. The wedding planning that follows requires navigation of complexities that few couples ever face. How do you invite guests to ceremony, involving someone whose secret identity must be protected from everyone except immediate family. How do you exchange vows that acknowledge responsibilities extending beyond normal matrimonial obligations? How do you promise to love and honor someone whose duties may require sacrifices that conventional marriage cannot anticipate? The solutions they develop emphasize privacy over spectacle, intimacy over publicity, commitment to shared values over social convention. The ceremony occurs in Smallville's Methodist Church, where Clark learned about moral responsibility from Jonathan and Martha Kent, with guests limited to those who know Superman's secret and can be trusted to protect it regardless of personal cost. Martha Kent's role in creating Lois's wedding dress parallels her earlier contribution to Superman's costume, transforming what could have been simple tailoring into expression of love that bridges the gap between alien heritage and human tradition. The fabric incorporates crystalline fibers that survived Krypton's destruction, creating garment that honors both worlds while celebrating union that transcends the boundaries of either. The vows they exchange acknowledge realities that conventional wedding ceremonies cannot address. Clark's promise to love and protect Lois encompasses both personal devotion and recognition that her safety may require choices that compromise other aspects of his heroic mission. Lois's commitment to supporting Clark acknowledges that marriage to Superman involves sharing him with a world that needs his protection more than any individual deserves his exclusive attention. But it's the private moment after public ceremony that truly defines their union. Standing together in the Kent farmhouse kitchen where Clark learned about moral responsibility, they acknowledge that their marriage represents something unprecedented partnership between ordinary human courage and extraordinary alien capability, in service of values that honor both heritage and choice. "I know what I'm signing up for," Lois whispers as they dance to music that only they can hear. "The secrets, the dangers, the times when duty will take you away from home. But I also know that you're the best man I've ever met, and that protecting others is part of what makes you worth loving." Clark's response encompasses gratitude that transcends language and relief that comes from finally sharing the burden of dual existence with someone whose strength equals his own in all the ways that matter most. "You're my anchor to humanity. When the weight of responsibility threatens to separate me from the people I'm trying to protect, you remind me that I'm not just Superman, I'm also Clark Kent, husband to the most remarkable woman on Earth." Their honeymoon, conducted between Superman emergencies that cannot wait for personal convenience, establishes patterns that will characterize their marriage for years to come. Love that adapts to extraordinary circumstances rather than demanding conventional expressions. Romance that finds expression through shared commitment to justice rather than simple personal happiness. Partnership that encompasses both intimate moments and cosmic responsibilities. The apartment they establish in Metropolis becomes sanctuary, where Superman can exist simply as Clark Kent, husband and partner to someone who knows all his secrets and loves him not despite his alien nature, but because of the choices he makes about how to use capabilities that could serve any purpose he chooses. Their home represents the human anchor that keeps Earth's greatest hero connected to the species he has dedicated his life to protecting. The age of solitary heroism ends with Superman's marriage to Lois Lane, replaced by partnership that demonstrates how extraordinary individuals can maintain connections to ordinary human experience through love that honors both capability and choice. Their union becomes symbol of possibility that bridges alien and human, exceptional and normal, cosmic and intimate in service of values that transcend the boundaries of species or worlds. Doomsday, death. The thing that emerges from Earth's prehistoric depths carries within its genetic structure the accumulated violence of 1,000,000 years of forced evolution, each death and resurrection designed to create the perfect instrument of destruction. Doomsday awakens in the shadowed caverns beneath what will someday become the American Midwest, with consciousness that encompasses only rage and the biological imperative to destroy everything that lives. This is not intelligence, as conscious beings understand it, but rather instinct, refined through countless cycles of death and rebirth, until only the most efficient killing mechanisms remain. The creature's origins stretch back to Krypton's ancient past, when that world's scientists sought to create the ultimate life form through procedures that violated every ethical principle their civilization had developed. The Genesis Chamber project involved subjecting a single infant to the horrors of Krypton's most dangerous environments, allowing it to die again and again, while advanced technology recorded each failure and used that information to create more resilient iterations. Each resurrection incorporated genetic improvements designed to overcome whatever force had caused the previous death. The process continued for decades until the being that emerged could no longer be classified as belonging to any known species. Doomsday represented evolution stripped of all mercy, adaptation focused solely on survival through superior violence. His bone structure became weapons capable of piercing any defense. His musculature developed beyond all reasonable biological limits. His nervous system evolved redundancies that made him essentially impossible to kill through any means that had previously claimed his life. But it was his psychological development that truly defined his threat to all living things. The trauma of countless deaths had burned away every emotion except rage, every instinct except the drive to inflict upon others the suffering that had shaped his existence. He became not merely a predator but a force of entropy given physical form, existing only to prove that nothing in the universe possessed sufficient strength to resist his destructive capabilities. The ancient Kryptonians who created him eventually recognized their error, but by then Doomsday had evolved beyond their ability to control or contain. The final battle that ended his original rampage across Krypton required the combined might of their greatest heroes and cost thousands of lives before the creature could be bound in containment that was designed to last for eternity. The burial chamber that held his dormant form was launched into space, carrying warnings in every language that Kryptonian science could devise about the catastrophe that would result from his awakening. That chamber, drifting through the cosmic void for millennia, finally crashes to Earth during the planet's Paleolithic era, burying itself so deeply beneath the surface that geological processes seal it away from detection. For millions of years, Doomsday remains dormant, while continents shift and species evolve above his resting place. But the same forces that created him ensure his eventual awakening. Biological systems designed for perpetual resurrection gradually overcome the stasis fields that have held him in suspended animation. His emergence coincides with a period when Superman's heroic career has reached unprecedented heights of public confidence and personal satisfaction. The marriage to Lois Lane has provided emotional stability that allows him to approach his duties with renewed energy and optimism. His relationships with the Justice League have deepened into partnerships that enable coordination against threats that no individual hero could address alone. Most importantly, his integration into human society has progressed to the point where Clark Kent and Superman feel like complementary aspects of a unified identity, rather than competing personas that require constant management. The first signs of Doomsday's awakening register as seismic disturbances in the American Midwest that geological surveys cannot explain through normal tectonic activity. The tremors follow patterns that suggest something massive moving through underground chambers, while electromagnetic anomalies indicate the presence of technology that operates according to principles beyond current human understanding. Superman's investigation of these phenomena leads him to underground caverns where his enhanced senses detect something that fills him with instinctive dread. The smell that emanates from the deepest chambers carries overtones that Superman's Kryptonian genetics recognize as the scent of his own species, but corrupted by something that transforms familiarity into horror. His X-ray vision penetrates layers of rock and metal to reveal containment systems that bear unmistakable signs of Kryptonian origin, though their purpose seems designed for imprisonment rather than preservation. Most disturbing of all, his superhearing detects a heartbeat slow, massive, and growing stronger with each passing hour. The escape occurs with explosive violence that registers on seismographs around the world as Doomsday tears through geological barriers that have confined him for eons. His first sight of Earth's surface fills him with rage that encompasses not just the living beings he encounters but the very concept of life itself. Trees, animals, bacterial, represent targets for destruction that his evolved nature compels him to eliminate with extreme prejudice. His rampage across the American heartland leaves a trail of devastation that defies conventional understanding of what single organisms can accomplish. Forests that have stood for centuries disappear beneath his assault. Rivers change course when his passage alters the landscape through pure physical force. Small towns vanish entirely as Doomsday's path intersects with human settlements whose residents cannot comprehend the magnitude of the threat approaching them. The Justice League's initial response treats the crisis as another powerful enemy whose defeat requires coordinated superhuman effort rather than recognition of an existential threat to all life on Earth. Booster Gold and Blue Beetle encounter Doomsday first, their combined technological capabilities proving utterly inadequate against a being whose evolution has prepared him for every conceivable form of attack. Their defeat occurs with such swift brutality that neither hero has time to fully understand what they have encountered before losing consciousness. The pattern repeats as additional heroes attempt to halt Doomsday's advance toward populated areas. Fire and Ice, the Blood Pack, guardian each confrontation, demonstrates that conventional superhuman abilities cannot address threats that exist beyond normal categories of criminal or alien invasion. Doomsday doesn't merely defeat his opponents. He overwhelms them with violence so savage that survival becomes the only victory available to heroes accustomed to protecting others. Superman's first direct encounter with Doomsday occurs in the ruins of a small Kansas town, where the creature has paused to destroy a children's playground with methodical thoroughness that speaks to hatred directed not just at present life, but at the possibility of future joy. The symbolism is lost on neither combatant. This battle will determine whether Earth's children have any future worth inheriting. The fight that follows transcends every previous standard that Superman has used to measure physical conflict. Doomsday's strength equals his own, while his savagery far exceeds anything that moral constraints allow Superman to match. Each blow exchanged between them creates shockwaves that shatter windows for miles around, while their passage through the landscape leaves craters that resemble artillery bombardments. But it's the psychological dimension of their conflict that proves most challenging for Superman to process. Doomsday fights not to win or to achieve any comprehensible objective, but simply to inflict maximum damage on everything he encounters. His rage appears infinite and undirected, consuming everything within reach while demanding nothing except the opportunity to destroy more. Facing such an enemy requires Superman to confront possibilities that his moral framework has never been forced to consider. The battle moves from rural Kansas toward Metropolis, as Doomsday's path intersects with population centers that contain millions of innocent lives. Superman's attempts to redirect the creature's attention toward himself partially succeed, but Doomsday seems to understand that causing collateral damage inflicts psychological wounds that pure physical violence cannot achieve. His attacks focus not just on Superman, but on the civilians whose protection Superman considers his primary responsibility. The final phase of their conflict takes place in Metropolis itself, where the Justice League makes its last desperate attempt to contain a threat that conventional superheroism cannot address. The combined might of Earth's greatest heroes proves capable of slowing Doomsday's advance, but not stopping it, as each fallen teammate forces Superman to face increasing certainty that conventional victory may be impossible. Lois Lane's presence during the final confrontation adds personal stakes that transcend general humanitarian concern. Her coverage of the battle for the Daily Planet requires proximity to dangers that would instantly kill any normal human, while her emotional investment in Superman's survival creates tactical complications that Doomsday's instincts allow him to exploit. The creature's recognition that harming her would wound Superman more deeply than any physical attack makes her both observer and unwilling participant in cosmic conflict. The death blow that claims Superman's life occurs simultaneously with the attack that finally ends Doomsday's rampage. Both combatants recognize that their conflict can end only when one of them stops moving permanently, leading to final exchange of violence that channels every remaining ounce of strength into attacks designed to cause maximum damage. The impact of their collision creates seismic disturbances that register on instruments around the world, while their mutual destruction plays out in view of television cameras that broadcast humanity's loss to a global audience. Superman's final words, whispered to Lois as his strength fades beyond recovery, encompass both love for individuals and species whose welfare he has dedicated his life to protecting. Tell them I. The sentence remains forever incomplete, as the greatest hero Earth has ever known succumbs to injuries that even Kryptonian physiology cannot overcome. The image that defines this moment for history shows Superman's lifeless form cradled in Lois Lane's arms, while Doomsday's equally motionless bulk lies mere yards away, their mutual destruction having saved a world that neither combatant will live to see recovered. The cape that once symbolized hope now serves as shroud for heroism that proved stronger than death itself, though claiming that victory required the ultimate sacrifice. The funeral that follows encompasses not just Metropolis or America, but the entire world, as billions of people struggle to comprehend existence without the symbol of hope that Superman's presence provided. World leaders who once viewed his intervention as unwelcome interference now acknowledge that his loss represents catastrophe beyond any previous human experience. Religious communities grapple with theological questions about whether divine beings can truly die in service of creatures they could have chosen to dominate instead. But it's the personal grief of those who knew Clark Kent as well as Superman that provides the most poignant reminder of what has been lost. Martha and Jonathan Kent mourn not just the world's greatest hero, but the son they raised from infancy, whose alien heritage never mattered as much as the character they helped shape through 18 years of patient love. Lois Lane faces not just widowhood, but the end of partnership that encompassed both intimate marriage and shared commitment to truth and justice. The black armbands that millions wear during the months following Superman's death become symbols not just of mourning, but of determination to honor his memory through continued commitment to the values he embodied. His example continues to inspire even after his death, proving that true heroism transcends the individuals who exemplify it to become part of the permanent human heritage. The age of Superman appears to have ended with his death in battle against an enemy whose existence violated everything that made life worth protecting. But death, like the threats that heroes face, proves to be not ending but transformation that creates new possibilities for hope in a universe that refuses to surrender to entropy without offering resistance that honors both courage and love.